You're trash. Dean Vivian Crow doesn't even look up as she shreds the hospital discharge papers, the sound of tearing documents echoing through her pristine office like a verdict being ripped apart. Nia Cross stands frozen in yesterday's scrubs, blood still crusted under her fingernails, watching her scholarship folder sail into the wastebasket with the casual flick of a wrist that has ended futures before. 19 years old, top of her nursing class, and expelled. Not for cheating, not for failing, but for stopping to save a dying woman while everyone else stepped over her like street garbage. The clock on the wall reads 9:47 a.m. on a Thursday morning, and Nia's entire world has just collapsed in the time it takes to destroy 3 pieces of paper. Before you find out whether justice exists in a system designed to punish compassion, I invite you to follow this story to the very end. Like and comment with the city you're watching from so I can see how far this truth travels. The fluorescent lights in Dean Vivian Crow's office hummed with the kind of sterile efficiency that made everything feel like a medical examination, cold, clinical, and designed to make you feel small. Nia Cross had been standing in front of that massive mahogany desk for 7 minutes, though it felt like 7 hours, watching a woman who'd never missed a manicure appointment decide whether her life was worth continuing. Miss Cross, Dean Crow's voice carried the particular tone of someone who'd perfected disappointment into an art form. Do you understand the severity of what you've done? Nia's jaw tightened. The blood under her fingernails had dried to a dark rust color. She'd scrubbed twice in the campus bathroom before this meeting, but some stains went deeper than soap could reach. Her scrubs, borrowed from the EMT who'd finally arrived at the scene, hung loose on her frame and smelled like antiseptic in someone else's shift. I saved someone's life, Nia said quietly. Her voice didn't shake, though everything inside her wanted to. You missed your final examination. Dean Crow picked up a folder, Nia's folder, the one that contained every scholarship form, every perfect grade, every recommendation letter that had gotten her into Millbrook University's prestigious nursing program, despite being a 19-year-old black girl from the East Side who couldn't afford the deposit without 3 jobs. You violated the Academic Integrity Policy Section 4.7, failure to appear for scheduled examinations without prior administrative approval. I was performing CPR on a woman who was bleeding out on Market Street. Nia's hands curled into fists at her sides. There were 50 people who walked past her, 50 people who looked at her lying there and kept walking like she was a piece of litter. I'm a nursing student. I couldn't just leave her. And where is your documentation of this alleged emergency? The word alleged landed like a slap. Nia reached into the pocket of her scrubs and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. The incident report from the ambulance, hastily signed by a paramedic named Rodriguez, who told her she'd done everything right. She set it on the desk with the careful precision of someone laying down evidence in a trial. Dean Crow glanced at it for perhaps 2 seconds before picking it up between 2 fingers, as if it might contaminate her, and feeding it into the paper shredder beside her desk. The sound was obscene, a mechanical chewing that devoured proof and possibility in equal measure. That, Dean Crow said, gesturing to the shredder's bin, is not proper university documentation. That is a piece of paper any friend with a printer could have produced. We have standards, Miss Cross, standards that separate prestigious institutions from community colleges. Nia felt something crack inside her chest, something that had been holding her upright through 3 sleepless nights and 4 job shifts, and the endless cycle of being poor enough to need help, but never quite desperate enough to qualify for it. I have the woman's name, Nia said, her voice rising despite her best efforts to keep it level. Celeste Ashford. She was wearing a St. Regis Hotel key card. The paramedics took her to Mercy General. You can call them. You can verify. I can do no such thing, Miss Cross, because that would violate patient privacy laws you should know by now if you'd been attending your classes instead of playing hero. Dean Crow opened another folder. Your scholarship requires maintaining a 3.8 GPA. A 0 on a final exam worth 40% of your pharmacology grade will drop you to a 3.2. Your scholarship is hereby revoked, effective immediately. Your balance due is $37,462. Payable within 30 days, or your transcripts will be frozen and your enrollment terminated. The number hit Nia like a physical blow. $37,000. She'd worked since she was 14, grocery store clerk, house cleaner, overnight warehouse stalker, and she'd never seen that much money in her entire life. Her mother made that much in a year, before taxes, working 2 jobs that destroyed her knees and her spirit in equal measure. "You can't do this," Nia's voice cracked. "I've never missed a class. I've never been late. My GPA was 3.97 before yesterday. I saved that woman's life." "You made a choice, Miss Cross." Dean Crow stood, smoothing her designer suit with hands that had never been dried out by industrial cleaner or cracked from winter cold. "You chose to prioritize a stranger over your educational obligations. Actions have consequences. In the medical field, we call that triage, deciding who deserves your attention. You chose poorly." "I chose to help someone who was dying." "You chose to help someone wealthy enough to afford the St. Regis, someone who undoubtedly had insurance and family and resources, instead of protecting your own future." Dean Crow's smile was thin and sharp as a scalpel. "That's the problem with students like you. You think the rules don't apply if your intentions are good, but intention doesn't pay tuition, intention doesn't earn degrees, and intention certainly doesn't change the fact that you failed to appear for an examination without proper authorization." "Students like you." The words hung in the air like smoke. Nia had heard variations of that phrase her entire life. Students like you in the principal's office, when she'd asked why the advanced placement classes were 90% white in a school that was 60% black. Students like you when she'd applied for the scholarship and the interviewer had seemed surprised she could speak in complete sentences. Students like you from her roommate's mother, who'd pulled her daughter aside and suggested she request a room change, just to be safe. "I want to appeal," Nia said. "There has to be an appeals process." "There is." Dean Crow sat back down, her expression bored. "You may submit a written appeal to the Academic Standards Committee within 5 business days. They meet once per semester. The next meeting is in 6 weeks. Until then, your status remains terminated and your balance remains due." "I don't have 6 weeks. My dorm contract expires at the end of the month. My meal plan is also revoked, as it was scholarship funded." Dean Crow picked up her phone, the universal signal that a conversation was over. "I suggest you focus on finding employment, Miss Cross. Perhaps a hospital will hire you for something appropriate to your skill level. Orderly work, perhaps. Janitorial services." Nia stood there for one more moment, looking at this woman who'd just dismantled her entire future with the emotional investment of someone canceling a subscription. Dean Crow's office was full of degrees: Harvard, Johns Hopkins, Oxford, framed in expensive wood and arranged like trophies. Photos showed her shaking hands with senators, cutting ribbons at hospital wings that bore her family's name, accepting awards for excellence in medical education. "Is there anything else, Miss Cross?" Dean Crow's finger hovered over her phone. "I have a meeting with the donors committee in 10 minutes, and they're not accustomed to waiting." "No," Nia whispered. "There's nothing else." She turned and walked out of that office with her spine straight and her head high, because she'd learned young that you never let them see you break in public. You save that for later, for when you're alone and the walls are thick enough to muffle the sound of a future collapsing. The door clicked shut behind her with the finality of a cell locking. Utum. 72 hours earlier, Nia had been worried about different things. The pharmacology final was worth 40% of her grade, and while she'd memorized every drug interaction, every contraindication, every mechanism of action until the chemical formulas danced behind her eyelids when she tried to sleep, there was always that edge of anxiety. The what if, the maybe you missed something, the voice that whispered you don't belong here in the quiet moments between one crisis and the next. She'd left her dorm at 6:47 a.m., giving herself over 2 hours for an exam that started at 9 o'clock. Overkill, maybe, but Nia had learned that margin for error was a luxury she couldn't afford. White students could roll into class 3 minutes late with Starbucks and sheepish grins and get a pass. Students like her got marked tardy, got flagged, got remembered. The number 47 bus was her lifeline. 42 minutes from campus to the east side, where she still had an evening shift at Morrison's grocery store because the scholarship covered tuition but not life. Not the textbooks that cost $300 each. Not the lab coat and stethoscope and the 1,000 small expenses that added up to the difference between making it and drowning. Market Street at 7:30 a.m. was its usual chaos. Construction workers grabbing coffee, business people power walking to catch trains, delivery trucks double parked and blocking traffic. Nia had her head down, reviewing notes on her phone when she heard the sound. Not a scream. That's what people expected, what they showed in movies. But real emergencies didn't announce themselves with Hollywood drama. Real emergencies sounded like a wet thud, and the sudden silence that followed, the kind of silence that made your nursing instructor's voice echo in your head saying, "Absence of sound can indicate absence of breath." Nia looked up. A woman lay on the sidewalk 30 feet ahead, her body crumpled in that wrong angle way that meant this wasn't a slip, wasn't a faint. Her blonde hair spread across the concrete like a halo gone dark with blood. She was wearing what Nia's roommate would have called real clothes, the kind of silk blouse and tailored pants that cost more than a month's rent and somehow communicated wealth even when soaked in blood. People were stepping around her, not quickly, not panicking, just stepping around, giving her body the same wide berth they'd give a puddle or a pile of garbage. A businessman in a suit glanced down, met Nia's eyes for a split second, and kept walking. A woman with a stroller actually said, "Excuse me," to the bleeding body as she maneuvered around it. Nia's feet moved before her brain caught up. "Call 911!" She dropped to her knees beside the woman, her backpack hitting the ground with a thud that scattered pencils across blood-slick concrete. "Someone call 911 right now!" No one stopped. The river of commuters parted around her like water around a stone, and Nia felt that familiar cold certainty settling in her stomach. The understanding that she was alone in this, that help was something you couldn't count on when you needed it most. The woman's eyes were half open, unfocused. Her breathing came in shallow gasps that bubbled pink at her lips. There was so much blood, arterial spray across her clothes, pooling beneath her shoulder. The bright, urgent red that meant right now meant seconds, not minutes. "Stay with me." Nia's hands moved automatically through the training drills she'd practiced 100 times. Check airway, check breathing, check circulation. "What's your name? Can you hear me?" The woman's lips moved. "Fell," she whispered. "Pushed. Fell." Pressure. That was the first rule. Stop the bleeding or nothing else mattered. Nia yanked her jacket off and pressed it against the woman's shoulder where the blood seemed brightest, leaning her weight into it. Her phone was in her backpack and she couldn't reach it without releasing pressure. "You!" Nia shouted at a teenager in headphones who was actually trying to take a video. "Call 911. Tell them we need an ambulance at Market and 5th. Major hemorrhage. Possible internal bleeding." The kid blinked at her, then kept filming. Rage and desperation mixed in Nia's throat like poison. "Call them or I swear to God." A hand appeared in her peripheral vision, an older black man in a security guard uniform. "I got it, honey. Ambulance is on the way. What do you need?" "Something to keep pressure on this wound, and I need you to keep people back." He shrugged off his jacket and handed it to her, then stood up and spread his arms wide. "Y'all need to move. Give her space. Move back." The crowd shuffled back maybe 3 feet, phones out now, because apparently the spectacle of someone fighting for life was worth recording even if it wasn't worth helping. Nia bundled the security guard's jacket over her own and pressed down harder. The woman's eyes found hers, suddenly focused, suddenly present. "Celeste," she gasped. "My name is Celeste Ashford." "Okay, Celeste. I'm Nia. You're going to be fine. Stay with me." Nia shifted slightly to check the woman's pulse. Rapid and thready, bad sign. "Can you tell me what happened?" "Meeting, argued with." Celeste's face twisted with pain. "Fell backwards. Hit the pillar." Nia glanced up and saw it. The decorative concrete pillar at the edge of the building, its corner dark with blood. Market Street was under construction, metal scaffolding and exposed edges everywhere. One wrong step, one push, and the city became a weapon. "Who pushed you?" Don't know." Celeste's hand suddenly gripped Nia's wrist with desperate strength. "Can't breathe right." Punctured lung, maybe. Or shock setting in. Nia was a nursing student 3 weeks from finals, not an ER doctor, and the weight of what she didn't know was crushing. "Ambulance is 2 minutes out," the security guard said. He'd given up trying to move the crowd and was now standing guard over them, his presence a barrier against the phones and the gawkers. "You're doing good, kid." 2 minutes. Nia could keep pressure for 2 minutes. She could keep this woman alive for 2 minutes. "Tell me about yourself, Celeste," Nia said, because her instructor had taught her that keeping trauma patients talking kept them conscious, kept them fighting. "What do you do?" "Lawyer," Celeste whispered. "Civil rights, discrimination cases." Her laugh turned into a cough, and Nia felt hot blood seep through the makeshift bandage. "Ironic, right? I spend my life fighting for people no one else will help, and now someone's helping you," Nia said firmly. "You're going to be fine. You're going to go back to fighting those cases." Sirens finally cut through the city noise. The crowd parted reluctantly, and 2 paramedics appeared with a stretcher and equipment that made Nia's makeshift first aid look like playing doctor with dolls. "Student nurse," Nia reported as they took over, falling into the clinical language that made everything feel manageable. "Arterial bleed from the shoulder, possible head trauma. Breathing is labored, pulse is weak and rapid. Patient is alert and oriented. Gave name as Celeste Ashford. She said she fell, possibly pushed." The lead paramedic, his name tag read Rodriguez, gave her an approving nod. "You did good, kid. Real good. Probably saved her life." He pressed a piece of paper into her hand while his partner worked. "Incident report. You're listed as first responder. Might want to keep that." They had Celeste on the stretcher in 90 seconds, IV line in, oxygen mask on, moving with the practiced efficiency that Nia dreamed of mastering someday. The woman's hand shot out one more time as they lifted her, catching Nia's sleeve. "Thank you," Celeste whispered through the oxygen mask. "Thank you for stopping." Then they were gone, the ambulance pulling away with lights flashing and sirens fading into the city's ambient noise. The crowd dispersed like smoke, everyone suddenly late for wherever they'd been going. The security guard picked up Nia's backpack and handed it to her. "You're a good person," he said quietly. "Not a lot of those left." Nia looked down at herself, scrubs soaked with blood that wasn't hers, hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. The incident report crumpled in her fist. Her phone said 8:47 a.m. She'd missed her bus. The next one wouldn't arrive for 20 minutes, wouldn't get her to campus until 9:30 at the earliest. The exam started at 9:02. The doors locked at 9:05. University policy, strictly enforced. For one terrible moment, Nia stood on that blood-stained sidewalk and considered the possibility that she'd just destroyed her entire future to save a stranger's life. Then she started running. She made it to the pharmacology building at 9:07 a.m., her lungs burning and her legs screaming and blood still dried in the creases of her palms. The door was closed. Through the narrow window, Nia could see rows of students bent over their exams, pencils moving, the quiet concentration of people who'd arrived on time and would leave with their futures intact. She tried the handle anyway. Locked. "They don't let anyone in after 5 past," a voice said behind her. Nia turned to find Dr. Patricia Wells, her pharmacology professor, standing with a coffee cup and a look of mild surprise. Dr. Wells was one of the good ones, tough but fair, the kind of teacher who stayed late to explain concepts until everyone got it, who remembered students' names and asked about their lives like the answers mattered. "Dr. Wells, I can explain—" "You missed the exam, Miss Cross." Dr. Wells's expression shifted from surprise to disappointment, and somehow that was worse than anger. "I'm genuinely shocked. You're my best student. What could possibly—" "There was a woman dying on Market Street." The words tumbled out of Nia in a rush, desperation making her voice crack. "She was bleeding out, and everyone was walking past her, and I couldn't just leave her. I tried to get here on time. I ran the whole way, but the bus—" "Miss Cross," Dr. Wells held up a hand. "I understand that you believe you had an emergency, but university policy is clear. No exceptions for late arrivals to final examinations. It's on your syllabus, it was announced multiple times, and the door locks at 9:05 precisely to prevent disruption to other students who manage to arrive on time. I have an incident report." Nia pulled the crumpled paper from her pocket, smoothing it out with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "From the paramedic. It has the time, the location, everything. You can verify—" Dr. Wells didn't take the paper. That's not university-approved documentation, Miss Cross. If you'd been hospitalized yourself, if you'd had a death in your immediate family, there are procedures. You file paperwork with the dean's office, you get documentation from appropriate authorities, and you request accommodation before the exam, not after. There wasn't time. She was dying. And that's a tragedy. Dr. Wells's voice softened slightly, but her position didn't. But it doesn't change the policy. The exam is 40% of your grade. Missing it means failing the course. You can retake it next semester, assuming your scholarship. My scholarship requires maintaining 3.8, Nia whispered. If I fail this course, then you should have prioritized differently. Dr. Wells turned toward the faculty office. I'm sorry, Miss Cross, I really am, but rules exist for a reason. Perhaps this will be a valuable lesson about professional boundaries and the importance of putting your own obligations first. She walked away, leaving Maya standing in the hallway with blood under her fingernails and a piece of paper that proved she'd done the right thing, just not in the right way, not with the right paperwork, not with the right protections that rich students had and poor students didn't. The door to the exam room was glass. Through it, Nia could see Lauren Morrison, her roommate, her lab partner, the girl whose mother had suggested the room change, bent over her test with a slight smile, confident and calm. Lauren had been out until 2 a.m. the night before at some fraternity party. She'd rolled into their dorm drunk and giggling while Nia was reviewing notes, and she'd made it to the exam on time anyway because Lauren had a car and money for gas and the luxury of never having to choose between saving a life and saving her own future. Nia pressed her hand against the glass for just a moment, feeling the cool surface against her palm. Inside that room was everything she'd worked for. The degree that would lift her family out of poverty, the career that would prove all the guidance counselors wrong, the life that existed somewhere beyond the East Side and grocery store shifts and the constant exhaustion of being poor. Then she turned and walked away, because there was nothing else to do. The eviction notice was taped to her dorm room door when she got back, printed on official university letterhead with the efficiency of a system that had done this before. Resident contract terminated due to scholarship revocation. Vacate premises within 72 hours. Failure to comply will result in removal of personal possessions and additional fees. Lauren was inside, packing. She had the grace to look uncomfortable when Nia walked in. They sent an email, Lauren said, not quite meeting her eyes. I'm sorry, my mom already called about a new roommate assignment for next semester. Of course she had. Nia wondered if Lauren's mother was relieved or disappointed that it had ended this way, not with violence or theft or any of the stereotypes she'd probably feared, but with bureaucratic efficiency and a student who'd made the mistake of caring about someone else's life more than her own. It's fine, Nia said, because what else was there to say? She had 3 jobs and negative money in her bank account and nowhere to go, but it was fine. Everything was fine. She started packing her half of the room in mechanical silence, clothes into garbage bags because she didn't own luggage, textbooks into boxes that she'd have to abandon because she couldn't carry them. The little collection of things that had made this room feel like hers, carefully wrapped and stowed. The photo of her mother at her high school graduation, looking proud and tired and hopeful. The acceptance letter to Millbrook University, framed with money she'd saved for 2 months. The anatomy textbook her favorite teacher had given her as a gift, inscribed Future Dr. Nia Cross. Where will you go? Lauren asked quietly. Home, I guess. Home to the East Side. To the apartment where her mother slept on the couch, so Nia could have the bedroom. To the neighborhood where everyone knew she'd been the one who got out, and now they'd know she'd failed and come back. I'll figure it out. Nia? Lauren sat on her bed, perfect and pretty and so far from understanding. I'm really sorry about all of this, but can I ask you something? Nia kept packing, because if she stopped moving, she might fall apart. Why did you do it? Lauren's voice was genuinely confused. Why did you stop? You had to know what it would cost. You knew the exam was today. You knew the policy. Why risk everything for some random person? Nia finally looked up. Because she was dying, Lauren. Because 50 people walked past her like she was garbage, and I couldn't be the 51st. But you didn't even know her. I didn't have to know her to know she deserved help. Lauren shook her head slowly, the way you might look at someone who just explained they believed in fairies or flat earth, with pity for the delusion. That's really noble, Nia. It is. But it's also kind of stupid. You threw away your entire future for a stranger. What if she hadn't even been worth saving? What if she was some awful person who no one's life is worth less because of who they are? Nia's voice came out harder than she intended. That's the whole point. That's why I wanted to be a nurse. Because everyone deserves someone who will stop. Even if stopping destroys you? The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Nia zipped up the last bag and stood, shouldering the weight of everything she could carry. Especially then, she said quietly, because if we only help people when it's convenient, when it's safe, when there's no cost to us, then we're not really helping at all. We're just performing goodness for an audience. She left Lauren sitting on that bed in their shared room that wasn't shared anymore, walked out into the hallway where students were laughing and planning their summer breaks and complaining about finals stress like it was a weather pattern that would pass. No one asked where she was going. No one offered help. Nia Cross, 19 years old, former nursing student, dragged her entire life in garbage bags down 4 flights of stairs and out into the afternoon sun. Her phone buzzed with a text from Morrison's grocery store, reminding her she was scheduled for the evening shift, and she had to bite back hysterical laughter because at least she still had that, minimum wage and sore feet and the privilege of working herself to exhaustion for people who never looked her in the eye. She stood on the sidewalk outside her former dorm with everything she owned in trash bags at her feet, watching students stream past to their next classes, their next opportunities, their futures that stretched out bright and assured and safe. And she realized with a cold clarity that made her bones ache that she'd been taught a lesson after all, just not the one Dr. Wells had meant. The lesson was this: compassion is a luxury that only the privileged can afford. Caring about strangers is for people with safety nets and second chances and families with money for lawyers. For students like her, poor, black, one crisis away from losing everything, the system's message was clear: keep your head down, keep walking, save yourself, because no one was going to save you. The apartment Nia finally landed in was a basement studio on the east side that smelled like mold and broken pipes. $200 a week, paid in cash to a landlord who didn't ask questions and didn't fix things. One room with a hot plate, a bathroom with tiles coming loose, and a window that looked out onto other people's garbage cans. Her mother had cried when she'd come home. Not the loud, dramatic crying of television, but the quiet kind that was somehow worse. Shoulders shaking, hands over her face, the sound of hope dying. "Baby," she'd whispered. "Oh, baby, I'm so sorry." Nia had held her mother on the couch that was also her mother's bed and promised it would be okay. They'd figure something out. This wasn't the end. All lies, kindly meant. Morrison's grocery store kept her on the schedule, but minimum wage plus 2 other part-time jobs barely covered rent and food. The $37,000 bill from Millbrook arrived in the mail like a bomb in an envelope, professional letterhead, and payment plans that assumed she was a person with credit and options. She threw it in the trash with the rest of her future. 3 days after moving into the basement studio, Nia got another letter. This one was from Dean Crow's office, CC'd to 12 different university departments, informing her that her appeal had been formally noted and would be reviewed at the next Academic Standards Committee meeting in 6 weeks. Until then, her status remained terminated, her records frozen, and any attempt to register for classes or access university facilities would be considered trespassing. The letter concluded, "The university takes its academic integrity policies seriously and makes no exceptions for extenuating circumstances that could have been avoided with proper planning and professional judgment." Could have been avoided with proper planning. As if Nia had planned for someone to fall bleeding onto Market Street. As if she should have walked past, stepped over, kept her schedule pristine and her future secure, while a woman died on the sidewalk. She read that letter 3 times, each reading stoking the anger that had been building in her chest since the moment Dean Crow had shredded her documentation. Then she did what any nursing student would do when facing impossible odds. She started gathering evidence. The paramedic who'd taken Celeste Ashford to Mercy General had written his name on the incident report, Rodriguez. Nia called Mercy General's main line and asked for the emergency department, got transferred twice, and finally reached a harried-sounding nurse who confirmed that yes, a Celeste Ashford had been admitted 3 days ago with significant trauma and blood loss. And yes, the chart noted a student nurse had provided initial life-saving care at the scene. "Can I get a copy of that chart?" Nia asked. "Yeah. Not without the patient's consent or a court order, honey. HIPAA laws." "But," the nurse's voice dropped conspiratorially. "Between you and me? That woman asked about you, said she wanted to find the student who helped her. We don't usually give out information, but she seemed pretty insistent." Nia's heart stopped. "She's alive?" "Very much so. Recovering beautifully, from what I hear. Some kind of fancy lawyer, apparently. She's been making calls all day." Do you have her contact information?" "Can't give that out either, but I can tell you she's in room 417, and visiting hours are until 8 p.m. It was 6:30. Nia looked down at herself. Grocery store uniform, name tag still pinned to her chest, the smell of produce department, and broken dreams. She looked like exactly what she was, a girl who'd lost everything and was grasping at straws. But Celeste Ashford had asked about her, had wanted to find her. Maybe, just maybe, someone had noticed. Nia caught 2 buses to Mercy General, walked through the pristine lobby with its donor plaques and fresh flowers, took the elevator to the 4th floor. Room 417 had a private security guard outside it, a mountain of a man in a suit who looked at her name tag and grocery store uniform with the particular skepticism reserved for people who clearly didn't belong. "I'm here to see Celeste Ashford," Nia said, lifting her chin. "She asked about me. My name is Nia Cross. I'm the one who helped her on Market Street." The security guard's expression shifted slightly. Not to warmth exactly, but to recognition. He spoke into a radio, got a response Nia couldn't hear, then nodded. "Go ahead. Keep it brief." "Mrs. Ashford needs her rest." Nia pushed open the door to find a hospital room that looked more like a hotel suite, private bathroom, actual furniture instead of plastic chairs, flowers on every surface, and in the bed, propped up on pillows with her arm in a complicated brace and bandages visible beneath her hospital gown, was Celeste Ashford. She looked better than she had dying on Market Street, but that was a low bar. Her face was still pale, bruises blooming purple along her cheekbone, but her eyes were clear and focused, and they lit up the moment Nia walked in. "You," Celeste breathed. "You came. Oh, thank God. I've been trying to find you for 3 days." Nia stood awkwardly in the doorway, suddenly aware of how she must look: cheap uniform, exhausted face, the desperation that clung to poor people like a smell. "I wanted to check on you," Nia said quietly. "Make sure you were okay. The nurse said you were asking about me." "Asking about you?" Celeste laughed, then winced at the pain it caused. "Nia. It's Nia, right? I've had investigators trying to track you down. That security guard you talked to gave them a description but no name. The paramedic remembered a student nurse but no details. You disappeared like a ghost. I had to get to my exam." The words came out bitter. Not that it mattered. Celeste's eyes sharpened. "What do you mean?" And there it was. The question that opened the floodgates. Nia found herself sinking into the visitor's chair and telling this stranger everything. The locked door, Dr. Wells's disappointment, the incident report that Dean Crow had shredded, the scholarship revoked, the eviction notice, the $37,000 bill, the appeal process that was designed to exhaust rather than help. All of it spilled out of her in a rush, and Celeste listened with the intensity of someone who made a career out of hearing people's worst stories. When Nia finally stopped talking, Celeste was quiet for a long moment. "Let me make sure I understand," she said slowly. "You missed a final exam because you were saving my life. You had documentation proving that, and your university's response was to revoke your scholarship, expel you, and charge you tens of thousands of dollars." "University policy," Nia whispered. "No exceptions for late exam arrivals. Even for medical emergencies." "My medical emergency, not someone else's." Nia laughed hollowly. "Dr. Wells said it would be a valuable lesson about professional boundaries." "Professional boundaries." Celeste's voice went hard in a way that made Nia look up. "Tell me something, Nia. How many other students missed that exam?" "None." I was the only one. And has your university ever made exceptions for late arrivals? Ever? Nia thought about the stories she'd heard whispered in dorm rooms, the rumors that everyone knew but no one talked about. The white student who'd missed an exam because his girlfriend broke up with him and got a retake. The football player who'd slept through 3 finals and been given makeup tests. The senator's daughter who'd been hospitalized for alcohol poisoning the night before finals and received a medical exemption for the entire week. But those were rumors. Hearsay. Nothing she could prove. I don't know, she said carefully. Celeste smiled, and there was something sharp and dangerous in it. I do, she said, because I'm a civil rights attorney who specializes in discrimination cases, and I'm very good at my job. And right now, lying in this hospital bed because you refused to let me die on a sidewalk while everyone else stepped over me like trash, I'm thinking that your university just made a very expensive mistake. She reached for her phone on the bedside table. Do you still have that incident report? The one your dean shredded? The original is gone, but I took a photo of it before the meeting, just in case. Smart girl. Celeste's fingers moved across her phone's screen. Send it to me. Send me everything. The scholarship termination letter, the eviction notice, the exam policy from your syllabus, the bill from the university. Every piece of documentation you have. Why? Hope was dangerous. Nia had learned that. But it bloomed in her chest anyway, painful and sharp. Because, Celeste said quietly, you saved my life when everyone else decided I wasn't worth the inconvenience. And now I'm going to return the favor. She looked up, and her eyes were fierce. But I'm not going to just get you back into school, Nia. I'm going to make sure they never do this to another student again. The coffee shop 3 blocks from Mercy General was the kind of place that catered to hospital staff. Open 24 hours, strong coffee, and a studied indifference to people having intense conversations at corner tables. Nia sat across from Celeste Ashford's attorney, Marcus Chen, watching him spread documents across the scarred wooden surface with the precision of someone laying out evidence in a courtroom. This is worse than I thought, Marcus said, his voice pitched low enough that the exhausted residents at the next table couldn't hear. And I thought it was going to be bad. It had been 4 days since Nia's visit to the hospital. 4 days of sending emails and documents and watching her phone obsessively, half convinced that Celeste's promises had been the fever dreams of a woman on pain medication. But then Marcus had called that morning, professional, brisk, and asking if she could meet him today because time was a factor and the university was already moving to cover their tracks. What do you mean cover their tracks? Nia asked. Her hands wrapped around a coffee cup she couldn't afford, but Marcus had insisted on buying, the warmth seeping into fingers that hadn't stopped feeling cold since that meeting in Dean Crow's office. Your scholarship termination was processed within hours of your missed exam, Marcus said, tapping a printout with one finger. Unusually fast, given that most administrative actions take days or weeks. Your dorm eviction notice was issued before you'd even met with the dean, and there's no record of any appeal option being discussed with you during that meeting. She mentioned an appeal, said the committee met once per semester and the next meeting was in 6 weeks. Interesting. Marcus made a note on his legal pad. Because the Academic Standards Committee meeting schedule shows they actually met 2 days after your termination. You could have been heard immediately if anyone had wanted that to happen. The words landed like a punch. Nia set her coffee cup down carefully, afraid her shaking hands would spill it. They lied to me. They misled you, Marcus corrected, lawyer precise. There's a difference, legally speaking. But yes, you were given information designed to discourage you from fighting the decision. He pulled out another document, this one dense with highlighted text. However, this is where it gets interesting. I pulled your university's exam policy, the official one from the student handbook, not the one on your syllabus. What's the difference? Your syllabus says no late arrivals permitted under any circumstances. The official university policy says late arrivals may be excused with proper documentation for medical emergencies, family emergencies, or other extenuating circumstances at the discretion of the instructor and dean. Marcus looked up. Your professor and dean exercised their discretion. They chose not to excuse you. That's their right, isn't it? Nia's voice came out hollow. Discretion means they can decide however they want. In theory, yes. In practice, Marcus pulled out a thick folder. In the past 5 years, Millbrook University has granted exam exceptions to 47 students. 47 students who missed exams for various reasons and were allowed to make them up. Would you like to guess the demographic breakdown? Nia didn't want to guess. She already knew. The knowledge sat in her stomach like lead. 45 white students, Marcus said quietly. 1 Asian student whose family donated a new library wing, and 1 international student from Saudi Arabia whose father was an ambassador. He paused. Not a single black student, not a single Hispanic student, not a single Native American student in 5 years. The coffee shop noise seemed to fade into static. Nia heard herself ask, "How did you get that information?" "Mrs. Ashford has resources," Marcus said diplomatically, "and connections, and a very talented investigative team that she employs for her civil rights work. When she decides to look into something, she looks thoroughly." He spread out more papers, names, dates, circumstances. Here's a student who missed an exam because she had a panic attack. Excused, allowed to retake. Here's one who missed because his car broke down on the way to campus. Excused. This one slept through the exam because he'd been up all night at a party. Dean Crow herself signed off on his makeup exam. "That's the one Lauren told me about," Nia whispered. Everyone knew about it. The football player who was too hungover to take his chemistry final. "Tyler Brennan," Marcus confirmed. "Son of Judge Brennan from the State Appeals Court. He was given a makeup exam, no penalty, no questions asked. But you, performing actual emergency medical care with documentation with witnesses, you were expelled within hours." He leaned back. "That's not discretion, Nia. That's discrimination." The word hung between them, heavy and dangerous. "I can't prove that," Nia said. "They'll say it's about the policy, about being fair, about—" "They'll say exactly that," Marcus interrupted, "which is why we're not going to give them the chance to say it in private. We're going to make them say it in public." He pulled out a legal document, fresh and crisp and terrifying in its official weight. "This is a formal complaint to the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. It alleges that Millbrook University engaged in discriminatory enforcement of academic policies based on race, creating a hostile environment for students of color and denying equal educational opportunities. We're filing it today, and once we do, the university will be required to cooperate with a federal investigation." Nia stared at the document. Her name was on it. Nia Cross, complainant, and seeing it there made everything suddenly, terrifyingly real. "If I do this," she said slowly, "they'll fight back. They have lawyers. They have money. They'll make my life hell." "They already made your life hell," Marcus pointed out. "They expelled you, destroyed your documentation, and charged you tens of thousands of dollars for the crime of saving a woman's life. The question isn't whether they'll fight back. It's whether you're willing to fight at all." "I don't have money for lawyers. Mrs. Ashford is covering all legal costs. She considers it a debt she owes you." Marcus's expression softened slightly. "She's also prepared to make a statement about what happened, how you stopped when everyone else kept walking, how you saved her life at the cost of your own future. That testimony from someone like her will carry weight. Someone like her, white, wealthy, connected, the kind of person whose voice mattered in rooms where Nia's didn't. It was ugly and unfair and true, and Nia hated that she needed Celeste Ashford's privilege to validate her own worth. "What happens if we win?" Nia asked. "Best case scenario? You're reinstated with your scholarship, the exam policy is revised to prevent this from happening again, and the university is required to undergo anti-discrimination training and monitoring." Marcus paused. "Worst case? We lose, you're still expelled, and you've publicly accused a major university of racism, which could make it harder for you to get into other nursing programs. So either way, I'm taking a massive risk." "Yes." Marcus didn't dress it up or soften it. "But you're taking a risk for the right reasons, and you won't be alone in this." Nia looked at the complaint form, at her name printed there in official legal typeface. She thought about the 47 students who'd gotten second chances, about Tyler Brennan sleeping off his hangover while she'd been holding pressure on an arterial bleed, about Dean Crow's face as she'd shredded the incident report and called her trash. She thought about the next student like her, the next poor black girl who would make the wrong choice at the wrong time and be punished for it. Okay, Naya said, let's do it. Marcus smiled for the first time since they'd sat down. I'll need you to sign here, here, and here, and then I need you to do something that's going to be harder. What? I need you to stay quiet. He held up a hand before she could protest. The university doesn't know we're coming yet. They think you're just another student who got expelled and disappeared. The element of surprise is one of the few advantages we have. So no social media, no calling friends to vent, no telling your coworkers what's happening. Can you do that? Nia thought about the basement apartment where she spent her evenings in silence, about the grocery store job where no one knew her story, about how she'd already learned to make herself small and quiet and invisible just to survive. Yeah, she said, I can do that. She signed the papers with hands that only trembled slightly, and Marcus gathered them up with the satisfaction of someone collecting ammunition for a war. The complaint will be filed by end of business today, he said. The university will have 10 days to respond. After that, things are going to move fast. He pulled out a business card and slid it across the table. This is my direct line. You call me if anyone from Millbrook contacts you. Administration, faculty, students, anyone. Don't talk to them. Don't answer their questions. Don't let them intimidate you. Everything goes through me now. What if they threaten me? They won't, Marcus said. Not directly, but they'll try to pressure you to drop the complaint. They might offer you money, or readmission with conditions, or a quiet settlement that makes this all go away. They'll make it sound reasonable, generous even, but understand this. The moment you accept any offer they make without my involvement, you lose your leverage and they win. I won't take anything, Nia said. This isn't about money. Good, because when this goes public, and it will go public, you're going to become the face of something bigger than your individual case. Students are going to reach out to you with their own stories. Media might want interviews. The university is going to try to paint you as an opportunist or a troublemaker. You need to be ready for that. Nia looked at him, this stranger who was suddenly the closest thing to an ally she had. Why are you doing this? I mean, I know Mrs. Ashford is paying you, but you seem invested. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming against his coffee cup. I went to law school on scholarship, he finally said. Full ride, top of my class, everything going right. My second year I got pulled over driving home from the library. The cop said my taillight was out. It wasn't, but that didn't matter. He searched my car, found a prescription bottle with my medication in it, and arrested me because the name on the bottle was Marcus Chen, but my driver's license said Marcus Chen Rodriguez. My mom's name, hyphenated. That's insane. That's Monday, Marcus said dryly. Charges were eventually dropped, but not before I missed a week of classes and 2 exams. The law school let me make them up. Eventually, after I got a lawyer, after my parents flew in from California, after we made enough noise that they couldn't ignore it. But I had resources. I had parents who could afford plane tickets and lawyers and time off work. Most students don't. He looked at her directly. You saved someone's life and got punished for it because you're black and poor, and nobody thought you were worth protecting. That's not about policy. That's about power. And I didn't become a lawyer to let people with power crush people without it. Thank you, Naya said quietly. It felt inadequate, but it was all she had. Don't thank me yet, Marcus replied. This is going to get ugly before it gets better, but I promise you this, we're going to fight like hell. They parted ways outside the coffee shop, Marcus heading back to his office to file the complaint, and Nia heading to her evening shift at Morrison's grocery store. She spent 6 hours stocking shelves and bagging groceries, and smiling at customers who didn't see her, and the whole time her mind was spinning with what Marcus had told her. 47 students, 45 white, 5 years of a policy that was applied like a blade, sharp and cutting for some, invisible and flexible for others. Her manager, Terry, caught her in the break room at the end of her shift. He was a decent man, as managers went, didn't micromanage, didn't write people up for being 2 minutes late, actually seemed to remember that his employees were human beings with lives. Nia, he said, leaning against the locker next to hers. You okay? You've been somewhere else all night. I'm fine, she said automatically. Just tired. You're always tired. Terry crossed his arms. Look, I know it's not my business, but you're a good kid. Smart. I heard you were in nursing school before. Whatever happened? That true? Nia's hand stilled on her backpack zipper. Yeah, what? What happened? She could have lied. Could have said she'd failed out, lost interest, decided college wasn't for her. But something about the way Terry asked, genuinely curious, not judging, made her tell the truth. I missed a final exam because I was saving someone's life, she said. The university expelled me for it. Terry blinked. You're joking. I wish I was. That's... He shook his head. That's the most backwards thing I've ever heard. You're telling me they kicked you out for being a good person? They kicked me out for violating exam policy. Nia shouldered her backpack. Apparently there's a difference. That's bullshit. Terry said it with the conviction of someone who'd spent 20 years watching corporate policy punish workers for being human. You fighting it? Yeah, I am. Good. He pushed off from the locker. Listen, I can't do much, but if you need flexible hours or time off for court or whatever, you let me know. We'll make it work. It was a small kindness, but kindness had become so rare that it made Nia's throat tight. Thank you. Really. Don't mention it. And Nia? Terry paused at the break room door. Don't let them make you feel like you did something wrong. Saving someone's life isn't wrong. Punishing you for it is. She carried those words with her on the 2-bus journey back to her basement apartment, turning them over in her mind like stones worn smooth by water. The apartment was dark and cold and smelled like mildew, but it was hers, and after years of shared dorms and her mother's couch, privacy felt like luxury, even when the luxury came with cockroaches. Nia lay on the second-hand mattress that took up most of the floor space and pulled out her phone. She had 3 texts from her mother asking how she was. Her mother who was working doubles to help cover the deposit on this place. Her mother who still believed college would save them, even though Nia was living proof it wouldn't. She texted back a lie. Good. Everything's fine. Love you. Then she opened her photo gallery and scrolled back to the day on Market Street. She'd taken a photo of Celeste Ashford's face while they waited for the ambulance. Not for social media, not for proof, but because her instructor had taught them to document patients when possible. Celeste's face in the photo was pale and blood-streaked and terrified, but her eyes were focused on Nia with desperate trust. Thank you for stopping, she'd whispered through the oxygen mask. Nia wondered how many people had heard those words, how many lives had changed because someone decided to stop instead of keep walking, to care instead of looking away, to pay the cost of compassion even when the cost was everything. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. She almost ignored it. Probably more bills she couldn't pay, more official notices about money she didn't have. But something made her look. The sender was anonymous. The subject line read, "You're not the only one." Nia's finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity won. She opened the email. Dear Nia, I heard about what happened to you through a friend who works in the nursing department. I'm a former Millbrook student, graduated 2 years ago. During my junior year, my grandmother had a heart attack the morning of my organic chemistry final. I went to the hospital instead of taking the exam. I had documentation from the ER, from my family, everything. They made me retake the entire course. Cost me a semester and almost cost me my degree. I'm white, so I thought they were just being strict. But after hearing your story, I'm wondering if they would have been that strict if my grandmother had been white and if I'd been you. I'm willing to testify if it helps. You shouldn't have to fight this alone. The email was signed with just a first name, Sarah, and a phone number. Nia read it 3 times, her heart pounding. She wasn't the only one. Other students had been hurt by this policy, had lost time and money and opportunities to a system that claimed to be fair, but sharpened its edges for specific people. She thought about Marcus's warning to stay quiet, to not reach out, to let the lawyers handle everything. But Sarah had reached out to her. Sarah had offered help. Nia saved the email and Sarah's number. She didn't respond. Not yet. Not until she talked to Marcus. But she saved it like evidence, like hope. Her phone buzzed again. Another email. Different sender. Same subject line. You're not the only one. Then another. And another. By the time Nia fell asleep that night, she had 17 emails from former Millbrook students, current students, even a few faculty members who asked to remain anonymous. They told stories of missed exams excused for hangovers, but not for family emergencies, of policies applied with rubber flexibility for wealthy students and iron rigidity for poor ones, of a system that had been broken for so long that people had learned to accept the breaking as normal. One email stood out from a student named James. I'm still enrolled, so I can't use my name publicly, but I missed an exam last semester because I was in the ER with my kid. He had an asthma attack. I'm a single dad, work full-time, going to school part-time. Dean Crow told me I should have planned better, and that having children was a choice that came with consequences. She made me retake the class. I lost my financial aid because it dropped my GPA below the threshold. I'm a 28-year-old black man trying to get a degree so my son can have a better life, and they punished me for being a father. If you're fighting this, I want to help, even if it's just telling my story. This isn't about you anymore. It's about all of us. Naya sat up in her dark apartment, the glow of her phone screen the only light, and felt something shift inside her. Marcus had said she would become the face of something bigger than her individual case. She'd thought that meant pressure, meant scrutiny, meant becoming a symbol instead of a person. But maybe it meant something else. Maybe it meant she wasn't alone anymore. She forwarded all 17 emails to Marcus with a simple message. People are reaching out. What do I do? His response came back in less than 5 minutes. Save everything, document everything, don't respond yet. We're building a case, and they just handed us ammunition. I'll call you tomorrow. Nia set her phone down and lay back on her mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling of her basement apartment. Somewhere in the city, Dean Vivian Crow was probably sleeping in a house with multiple bedrooms and no mold, confident in her decision, secure in her power, certain that poor black girls who complained about unfairness would eventually give up and disappear like they always did. But Nia had learned something important in her nursing training, something that applied to more than just medicine. The human body could survive incredible trauma if it had the right support, the right care, the right people willing to fight for its survival. She had people willing to fight now, strangers who'd become allies, a lawyer who understood power, a woman whose life she'd saved and who was determined to save hers in return. The morning would bring new challenges. Marcus's call, the university's response to the complaint, the slow grind of justice that felt more like endurance than victory. But tonight, alone in her basement apartment with 17 strangers' stories saved on her phone, Nia Cross allowed herself to believe something she hadn't believed since the day Dean Crow had shredded her documentation. Maybe this wasn't over after all. She fell asleep thinking about policy and discretion and the 47 students who'd gotten second chances, and somewhere in her dreams, the number kept growing, 48, 49, 50, until it included her. The complaint was filed at 4:47 p.m. the next day. Marcus called to tell her, his voice crackling through her phone's cheap speaker as she stood in the Morrisons' break room, surrounded by motivational posters about teamwork and customer service excellence. "It's done," he said. "Official. The Department of Education has the complaint, and by law they have to notify the university within 48 hours. After that, Millbrook has 10 days to respond." "What happens in those 10 days? "They panic," Marcus said, and she could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "They call their lawyers, they review their policies, they start looking at their records and realizing just how bad this looks. And then they either come to the table ready to negotiate or they dig in for a fight. Which do you think they'll do? With someone like Dean Crow running academic affairs, they'll dig in, at least at first. She's not the type to admit mistakes." Papers rustled in the background. "But here's the thing about institutions. They're run by boards and committees and people who care about reputation and funding. When this goes public and the donors start asking questions, the calculus changes. When will it go public?" "Soon. We've already been contacted by 3 journalists who cover education policy. They smell a story." Marcus paused. "Nia, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer." The seriousness in his tone made her stomach clench. "Okay. If they offer you a settlement, full reinstatement, scholarship restored, clean record, but they require you to sign an NDA and agree not to talk about what happened, would you take it?" Nia looked around the break room with its time clock and its faded posters and its permanent smell of old coffee. She thought about the 17 emails on her phone, about James and his son's asthma attack, About Sarah and her grandmother's heart attack. About all the students who'd been punished for being human in a system that demanded perfection. No, she said quietly. I wouldn't take it, because it's not about me anymore. Good answer, Marcus replied. Because they're going to offer exactly that. Probably in the next few days. They'll make it sound generous, like they're doing you a favor. But what they're really doing is buying your silence so they can keep punishing the next student and the next and the next. I won't sign it. Even if it means you might lose, even if fighting this means you might never get back into nursing school, never get your degree, never have the future you planned? The question hung in the static between them. Nia closed her eyes and saw herself at 19, full of hope and terrified determination, walking into Millbrook University for the first time and believing that education was the ladder out of poverty, that hard work would be rewarded, that the system was fair if you just followed the rules. She'd been wrong about all of it. The ladder had rungs missing. Hard work got punished if you did it wrong, and the rules were written by people who'd never had to choose between saving a life and saving themselves. Yes, Nia said. Even then, because if I sign that NDA and disappear, nothing changes. Dean Crow keeps doing this. The next student gets crushed. And everything I went through, everything I lost, it's for nothing. Okay. Marcus's voice was warm with approval. Then we fight, all the way, no matter what they offer. Nia's shift ended at 8. She caught her usual buses home, the route so familiar now that she could close her eyes and know each stop by the rhythm of the brakes and the pattern of doors opening and closing. The basement apartment was dark when she arrived, and she was fumbling for her keys when she noticed the envelope taped to her door. It was expensive paper, heavy and cream-colored, with the Millbrook University seal embossed in one corner. Her name was typed across the front in formal script, Miss Nia Cross. Her hands shook as she unlocked her door, turned on the single overhead light, and opened the envelope. The letter inside was from President Harold Westbrook himself, written on official university letterhead. Dear Miss Cross, it has come to my attention that there may have been an unfortunate misunderstanding regarding your recent academic dismissal. Upon review of your case, I believe there may be room for a more compassionate resolution than our standard policies typically allow. I would like to invite you to meet with me and Dean Crow at your earliest convenience to discuss the possibility of your reinstatement. Please contact my office to arrange a meeting. With warm regards, President Harold Westbrook. Nia read the letter twice, her mind racing. They knew. Somehow, despite the complaint being filed less than 4 hours ago, despite Marcus's assurance that they wouldn't be notified for 48 hours, they knew. She pulled out her phone and called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. They sent me a letter, Nia said without preamble. The university president wants to meet to discuss reinstatement. Marcus swore softly. How did they... He cut himself off. Never mind. They have connections at the Department of Education. Someone tipped them off. What does the letter say exactly? Nia read it to him word for word. Compassionate resolution, Marcus repeated. That's code for settlement. They want to make this go away quietly. He was quiet for a moment, thinking. Don't respond yet. Forward me a photo of the letter. And Nia, this is actually good news. How is this good news? Because they're scared, Marcus said. Scared enough to have the president reach out personally. Scared enough to move this fast. They're trying to fix this before it becomes a public scandal, which means our complaint has teeth. Should I meet with them? Absolutely not. Not without me present, not without everything documented, and definitely not in private where it's your word against theirs. Marcus's voice hardened. This is a trap. They'll tell you they want to help. They'll make promises, and then they'll pressure you to drop the complaint before any of those promises are in writing. Don't fall for it. What do I do? You forward me that letter, and I respond on your behalf. I'll tell them that any discussion of your case must go through legal counsel and must include all parties to the complaint. That's Mrs. Ashford and myself. They won't like it, but that's their problem. Nia took a photo of the letter and sent it to Marcus, then sat on her mattress with the physical paper in her hands. President Westbrook's signature was at the bottom, a confident scrawl that probably signed diplomas and donation thank yous and letters of termination with equal ease. With warm regards. She almost laughed. There was nothing warm about this. It was calculation dressed up as compassion, a PR move designed to protect the institution at her expense. Her phone buzzed. Another email from a Millbrook student, subject line now familiar. You're not the only one. Then another, and another. By midnight, Nia had 43 emails from students and former students, each one a story of policy wielded like a weapon, of discretion that somehow always favored the same people. A pattern so clear that even a dean who shredded evidence couldn't hide it forever. She fell asleep thinking about what Marcus had said, that the complaint had teeth, that they were scared, that maybe, possibly, justice wasn't just a fantasy sold to poor kids who didn't know any better. And in the morning, when she woke to 17 missed calls from a blocked number and a new letter slipped under her apartment door, she knew that the fight was just beginning. The second letter wasn't from President Westbrook. It was from Dean Crow, and the warm regards were conspicuously absent. Miss Cross, I am disappointed to learn that you have chosen to pursue legal action rather than accept the generous reinstatement opportunity offered by President Westbrook. This decision reflects poor judgment and a concerning pattern of prioritizing conflict over resolution. Be advised that any public statements or media interviews regarding your case may be considered defamatory and will be met with appropriate legal action. The university takes its reputation seriously and will not tolerate false accusations. You have 48 hours to withdraw your complaint. After that, we will have no choice but to pursue all available remedies. Sincerely, Dean Vivian Crow. Nia read the threat 3 times, and with each reading, her fear transformed into something harder and colder and infinitely more dangerous. They weren't just scared, they were desperate, and desperate people made mistakes. She forwarded the letter to Marcus, typed out one sentence, "Is this legal?" and pressed send. His response came back in less than a minute. "No, it's witness intimidation. Save everything. We're going to bury them." The witness intimidation complaint was filed before noon. Marcus called Nia from his car, his voice tight with controlled anger as traffic sounds filtered through the connection. "I've amended our original complaint to include Dean Crow's letter as evidence of retaliation," he said. "This changes everything. They just handed us proof that they're trying to silence you through threats. The Department of Education takes this kind of thing very seriously." Nia was sitting on the floor of her apartment, surrounded by printouts of the 43 student emails she'd received. She'd organized them by year, by infraction, by outcome, building a timeline of discriminatory enforcement that stretched back 7 years, longer than Marcus's original investigation had covered. "What happens now?" she asked. Now they panic harder. Marcus's turn signal clicked in the background. "I'm on my way to meet with Mrs. Ashford. She wants to make a public statement about what happened to her on Market Street and how you saved her life. Once that statement goes out, the media coverage is going to intensify. The university won't be able to contain this as an internal matter anymore." "When will she make the statement?" "Tomorrow morning. Press conference at 10 a.m. She wants you there." Nia's stomach dropped. "Me? In front of cameras? You don't have to speak if you don't want to, but your presence matters. It puts a face to the story, makes it real instead of abstract." Marcus paused. "Nia, I know this is scary, but we're past the point of quiet negotiations and private settlements. They threatened you. They showed their hand. Now we show ours." After Marcus hung up, Nia sat in the silence of her apartment and tried to imagine standing in front of cameras and reporters, her face broadcast across news channels and social media, becoming the symbol of something she'd never asked to represent. The idea made her skin crawl, not from shame, but from the exposure of it. She'd spent her whole life learning to be invisible, to not draw attention, to survive by slipping through the cracks of systems designed to catch people like her. Now Marcus and Celeste were asking her to step into the spotlight and refuse to look away. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Dean Crow's threat letter had made her suspicious of every call, but something made her pick up. "Nia Cross?" The voice was female, young, nervous. "Yes?" "My name is Jennifer Walsh. I'm a reporter with the Chronicle Herald. I'm working on a story about discriminatory academic policies at Millbrook University, and I was hoping I could ask you some questions." Marcus's warning echoed in Nia's head. "Don't talk to anyone. Everything goes through me." But Jennifer Walsh sounded scared, not aggressive, and that made Nia curious. How did you get my number? I can't reveal my sources, but I can tell you that I've been investigating Millbrook's academic dismissal rates for 6 months. The data shows a clear pattern. Students of color are expelled at nearly 3 times the rate of white students for comparable infractions. Your case is the most egregious example I've found, but it's not unique. Jennifer paused. I know your lawyer probably told you not to talk to press, but I want you to know that this story is happening whether you participate or not. The only question is whether you want your voice included. What do you mean, my voice included? I mean, I can write about you. What happened, the complaint you filed, the intimidation letter from Dean Crow. Or I can write with you. Your perspective, your words, your story, told the way you want it told. Jennifer's tone softened. I'm not trying to pressure you. I know you're in an impossible position, but I've talked to 17 former students who say the same thing happened to them. They want their stories told. They want to know they're not alone, and they want someone to finally hold Millbrook accountable. 17. The same number of emails Nia had received that first night. Either Jennifer had the same sources, or the network of hurt students was larger than any of them had realized. I need to talk to my lawyer, Nia said carefully. Of course, here's my number. Call me back if you decide you want to talk. And Nia? Jennifer hesitated. For what it's worth, I think what you did was incredibly brave, saving that woman's life, fighting back when they tried to crush you. Not everyone has that kind of courage. The call ended, and Nia immediately dialed Marcus. He answered on the first ring. I just got a call from a reporter named Jennifer Walsh, Nia said. She says she's been investigating Millbrook for 6 months and has 17 former students who've told her the same thing happened to them. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Jennifer Walsh from the Chronicle Herald? Yes. She's good. I mean, really good. Won a regional journalism award last year for an investigation into housing discrimination. If she's been working this story for 6 months, she has sources we don't. Marcus exhaled slowly. Did you tell her anything? No, I told her I needed to talk to you first. Smart. Okay, here's what we're going to do. I'll reach out to Jennifer, verify what she's working on, and if it's legitimate, and I think it is, we'll coordinate. Her story can run after Mrs. Ashford's press conference. That way we control the narrative from both angles, the personal story and the investigative data. She said the story is happening whether I participate or not. She's right. But participation gives you some control over how you're portrayed. It's your decision, Nia. I can't make it for you. Nia thought about the 17 students, now 43, the number growing every day like a wound festering in darkness, finally exposed to light. She thought about James and his son's asthma attack, about Sarah and her grandmother's heart attack, about all the people who'd been punished for being human in a system that rewarded cruelty dressed up as policy. Okay, she said. I'll talk to her, but only after the press conference, only after Mrs. Ashford has told her story. Good. I'll set it up. Marcus paused. Nia, are you ready for what comes next? Because once these stories go public, there's no taking them back. You're going to be recognized. People are going to have opinions. Some will support you, some will call you a troublemaker, or worse. Your life is about to change in ways you can't predict. Nia looked around her basement apartment, the water-stained ceiling, the mold creeping up the corners, the mattress on the floor, and the hot plate that passed for a kitchen. This was what her life looked like now, after following the rules and making the right choice and being punished for it anyway. My life already changed, she said quietly. At least this way. Maybe someone else's won't have to. The press conference was held in the lobby of Ashford and Associates, Celeste's law firm, in a building downtown that made Nia feel small and out of place the moment she walked through the revolving doors. Marcus met her in the lobby, looking professional in a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Mrs. Ashford is upstairs preparing her statement, he said, guiding Nia toward the elevators. She wants to meet with you first before we go down to the conference room. Are you ready? Nia wasn't sure how to answer that. She'd borrowed clothes from her mother, a dress that was too big and shoes that pinched, because everything she owned was grocery store uniforms and the scrubs she'd been wearing when her life fell apart. She didn't look like someone who belonged in a glass tower with marble floors and abstract art that probably cost six figures. But she nodded anyway, and Marcus led her up to the 12th floor. Celeste Ashford's office was all windows and light, the city spread out below like a promise. Celeste herself looked different than she had in the hospital, healthy, strong, dressed in a power suit that telegraphed authority with every seam. But her eyes were the same, sharp and focused, and full of an intensity that made Nia understand why people hired her to fight their battles. Nia. Celeste stood and crossed the office in 3 strides, taking Nia's hands in hers. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being brave enough to do this. I'm not sure I'm brave, Nia admitted. I'm terrified. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's doing the right thing even when you're terrified. Celeste gestured to the chairs by the window. Sit. Please, I want to talk to you before we go downstairs. They sat, and Celeste pulled out a folder that Nia recognized. It was her case file, everything Marcus had compiled about the discrimination complaint. I've read everything, Celeste said. Every email from students, every piece of data about dismissal rates, every detail of what happened to you. And I want you to know something before we go down there and face those cameras. This isn't charity. I'm not doing this because I feel sorry for you or because I owe you a debt, though I do, and I'll never forget what you did for me on that sidewalk. Then why are you doing it? Because I spent 20 years building a career fighting discrimination in housing, employment, education, every system designed to keep certain people in their place while elevating others. I've won cases, changed policies, gotten settlements that meant something, but I've also gotten comfortable. Started taking cases I knew I could win, avoiding the fights that seemed too hard or too complicated. Celeste's voice went quiet. And then I was lying on Market Street, bleeding out, and 50 people walked past me like I was nothing, like my life wasn't worth the inconvenience of stopping. You know what I thought in that moment? Nia shook her head. I thought, this is what it feels like to be disposable. This is what it feels like when the system decides you don't matter. Celeste met Nia's eyes. I'm a wealthy white woman with connections and resources, and for 5 minutes I was invisible. Worthless. And then you stopped. You risked everything to save someone you didn't know, someone who couldn't help you, someone whose society had already decided wasn't worth saving because everyone else had made that calculation and kept walking. I didn't think about it, Nia said. I just couldn't not stop. Exactly. You couldn't not stop. Because you have something that most people lose somewhere along the way. You have a conscience that's louder than your self-interest. Celeste leaned forward. The university punished you for that. They looked at a student who saved a life and decided she was the problem. That's not about policy. That's about values. And I'm done being comfortable. I'm done taking easy cases. If they want to fight, we'll give them one they'll never forget. Marcus knocked on the doorframe. It's time. Reporters are set up downstairs. Celeste stood, and Nia followed, her legs feeling like water. They took the elevator down to the 3rd-floor conference room, and as the doors opened, Nia heard the sound that would define the next chapter of her life. The low roar of assembled media, cameras clicking, voices overlapping in that particular chaos that meant a story was about to break wide open. The conference room had been transformed into a press arena. 20 reporters, maybe more, with cameras and microphones and laptops open. Nia recognized the logos: local news, national outlets, education publications. Jennifer Walsh was there, standing in the back with a notebook, and she gave Nia a small, encouraging nod. Marcus guided Nia to a chair at the side of the podium, while Celeste stepped up to the microphone. The room quieted immediately, that instant shift from chaos to attention that powerful people commanded without effort. Thank you all for coming, Celeste began, her voice steady and clear. My name is Celeste Ashford. 9 days ago, I was walking to a business meeting on Market Street when I fell and struck my head on a concrete pillar. The impact caused a severe head wound and arterial bleeding. I was dying on that sidewalk. And despite the fact that it was 7:30 in the morning on a busy street in the middle of a major city, approximately 50 people walked past me. Not one person stopped to help. Not one person called 911. Not one person even slowed down. The reporters leaned forward, pens moving across notebooks, cameras focusing. Then a 19-year-old nursing student named Nia Cross saw me lying there, and she did stop. She dropped her backpack, knelt in my blood, and performed life-saving first aid until the ambulance arrived. The paramedics told her she'd saved my life. They were right. Without her intervention, I would have bled out on that sidewalk while people stepped around me like garbage. Celeste paused, letting the image sink in. Nia Cross missed her final examination that morning because she was too busy keeping me alive. And for saving my life, Millbrook University expelled her. The room erupted. Questions shouted over each other, reporters standing, cameras flashing. Marcus had told Nia this would happen, that the story of a student expelled for saving a life would be irresistible to media. But hearing it in Celeste's voice, spoken with the weight of legal authority and personal testimony, made it feel real in a way it hadn't before. Celeste held up a hand, and the room quieted again. "I'm not here to argue about university policy or academic standards," she continued. "I'm here to present facts." Fact: Nia Cross had perfect attendance and a 3.97 GPA before that morning. Fact: she provided documentation of the emergency to the Dean of Academic Affairs. Fact: the Dean shredded the documentation and told Nia she was trash. Fact: in the past 7 years, Millbrook University has granted exam exceptions to 47 students, 45 of whom were white, but has never granted such an exception to a black student despite numerous requests supported by documentation. More shouting, more questions. Celeste spoke over them. "This is not about one student's bad luck. This is about a pattern of discrimination so clear, so documented, so systemic that it constitutes a violation of federal civil rights law. We have filed a formal complaint with the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. We have evidence of retaliatory threats made against Ms. Cross when she refused to withdraw that complaint. And we have testimony from dozens of students, current and former, who describe a culture at Millbrook University where academic policies are enforced along racial lines." Celeste turned slightly, gesturing to Nia. "This young woman saved my life at the cost of her own future. The question I want every person watching this to ask themselves is simple. What kind of institution punishes compassion? What kind of education teaches students that helping a dying person is the wrong choice? And what kind of society do we want? One where people like Nia Cross are celebrated for their courage, or one where they're crushed for having a conscience?" She stepped back from the microphone, and immediately the questions came like a flood. "Is Miss Cross going to speak? What damages are you seeking? Has the university responded? Are other students involved?" Marcus stood and raised his hands. "We'll take questions now. Please identify yourself and your outlet." A woman in the front row stood. "Sarah Kim, Education Weekly. Mrs. Ashford, you mentioned evidence of a pattern. Can you quantify that?" Marcus answered, his voice carrying the precision of someone who'd prepared for exactly these questions. "In the past 7 years, Millbrook University has expelled or academically dismissed 163 students for various policy violations. Of those dismissals, 109, that's 67%, were students of color, despite students of color making up only 31% of the student body. When we narrow it to exam policy violations specifically, the disparity is even more stark. 100% of exam-related dismissals in the past 5 years have been students of color." The room exploded again. Reporters typing frantically, cameras swinging between Marcus and Celeste, and Nia, who sat frozen in her chair trying to process what Marcus had just revealed. 100%. Not just a pattern, but a wall. Absolute, total, unbreakable. Another reporter stood. "David Chen, Chronicle Herald. Miss Cross, can you tell us in your own words what happened that morning?" All eyes turned to Nia. She felt her throat close. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair. She hadn't prepared a statement. Marcus had told her she didn't have to speak at all, that her presence was enough. But looking out at those reporters, at Jennifer Walsh in the back with her notebook, at the cameras that would carry this story to people who didn't know her name yet, but would by tonight, Nia felt something shift inside her. These people wanted to hear from her, not from lawyers or advocates or wealthy benefactors, but from her. The girl who'd stopped on Market Street. The student who'd been called trash. She stood slowly, and Marcus gave her an encouraging nod. "I saw a woman dying," Nia said, her voice shakier than she wanted but steady enough. "Everyone else saw her too. They just kept walking. I couldn't do that. I'm a nursing student. I was a nursing student, And I was taught that you don't ignore someone who's dying just because it's inconvenient. She paused, gathering courage. When I got to campus, I was 7 minutes late. The exam had started at 9 o'clock, and the door locked at 9:05. I tried to explain what happened. I had documentation from the paramedic, I had the woman's name, the hospital where they took her, everything. But none of it mattered because I didn't have the right kind of paperwork filed before the emergency happened. A reporter started to interrupt with a question, but Nia kept talking, the words coming faster now. Dean Crow told me I should have prioritized differently. She said I made a choice to help a stranger instead of protecting my future, and that choice had consequences. She shredded my documentation right in front of me and told me I was trash. Nia's voice cracked, but she pushed through. I lost my scholarship. I got evicted from my dorm. I owe $37,000 I'll never be able to pay. I work 3 jobs now just to afford a basement apartment with mold and broken pipes. And you know what the worst part is? The room was silent, everyone waiting. The worst part is that they want me to believe I did something wrong, that I should have kept walking, that saving someone's life was a mistake because it cost me everything. Nia's hands were shaking, but she didn't sit down. But I would do it again. I would stop again, because if we only help people when it's convenient, when it's safe, when there's no cost to us, then we're not really helping at all. We're just pretending to be good people while we step over bodies in the street. She sat down, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. The room stayed quiet for a heartbeat, 2, and then a male reporter stood. Tom Bradford, Metro News. That was powerful testimony, Miss Cross. But I have to ask, isn't it possible the university was just enforcing its policies consistently, that they couldn't make an exception for you without having to make exceptions for everyone? Marcus started to answer, but Celeste put a hand on his arm and stepped back to the microphone. That would be a reasonable question, Celeste said, her voice diamond hard, if the university actually enforced its policies consistently. But they don't. Let me share some specific examples. She pulled out a document. In 2022, a student named Tyler Brennan missed his chemistry final because he was hungover from a fraternity party. He was given a makeup exam with no penalty. In 2023, a student named Ashley Morrison missed her biology final because her car broke down. She was given a makeup exam. In 2024, a student named Kimberly Hart missed her physics final because of a panic attack. She was given a makeup exam and a medical exemption. Celeste looked up from the document. All 3 of those students are white. All 3 were granted exceptions. Meanwhile, a black student named James Porter missed an exam because his son was in the emergency room with an asthma attack, with full hospital documentation, and was forced to retake the entire course, costing him his financial aid. A Hispanic student named Maria Gonzalez missed an exam because she was in a car accident, police report and everything, and was expelled. This isn't about policy. This is about who the policy protects and who it punishes. Tom Bradford sat down, looking uncomfortable. Another reporter stood immediately. Rachel Morrison, State Journal. Has Millbrook University issued any response to these allegations? Not publicly, Marcus said. However, Miss Cross received a letter from Dean Crow 2 days ago threatening legal action if she didn't withdraw her complaint within 48 hours. We've amended our complaint to include that letter as evidence of retaliation and witness intimidation. The reporters went wild again. This was the kind of detail that turned a story from interesting to explosive, the university not just defending its actions, but actively threatening the victim. Celeste let the noise build for a moment before stepping back to the microphone. Let me be clear about what we're seeking. We want Nia Cross reinstated immediately with her full scholarship restored. We want the exam policy revised to include compassionate exemptions that are applied fairly and consistently. We want mandatory anti-discrimination training for all faculty and administration. We want an independent review of all academic dismissals in the past 10 years to identify other students who may have been discriminated against. And we want public accountability, not a quiet settlement with an NDA, but a transparent acknowledgement that Millbrook University failed its students and is committed to doing better. And if they refuse, someone shouted from the back. Celeste smiled, and there was nothing warm about it. Then we'll see them in court, and we'll win. Because the evidence is overwhelming, the pattern is undeniable, and the Department of Education doesn't take kindly to institutions that violate civil rights law while accepting federal funding. The press conference lasted another 30 minutes, questions and answers flowing like a choreographed dance. Marcus fielded the legal details, Celeste provided the moral authority, and Nia sat quietly at the side, watching journalists who'd never heard her name an hour ago now treat her story like it mattered. When it finally ended, Marcus hustled Nia out through a side door before reporters could corner her for individual interviews. They took the elevator back up to Celeste's office, and the moment the doors closed, Nia felt her knees go weak. "You did beautifully," Celeste said, squeezing her shoulder. "That line about stepping over bodies in the street, that's going to be the headline in every paper tomorrow." "I can't believe I said that," Nia whispered. "I can't believe any of this is real." "Believe it," Marcus said. "Because in about 2 hours, this is going to be on every news website in the region. By tonight, it'll be national. And by tomorrow morning, Millbrook University is going to be drowning in calls from reporters, angry alumni, and probably a few federal investigators." Celeste poured 3 glasses of water from the pitcher on her desk and handed them out. "Nia, I want you to take the rest of the day to breathe. Don't watch the news, don't read the comments online, don't answer calls from numbers you don't recognize. Marcus and I will handle any media follow-up. You've done your part." "What happens next?" Nia asked. "Now we wait," Marcus said. "The university has to respond. They can't ignore this now that it's public. They'll either come to the table ready to negotiate in good faith, or they'll issue some defensive statement that makes them look worse. Either way, we've shifted the power dynamic. They're reacting to us now instead of the other way around." Nia nodded, but she felt numb, like she was watching herself from outside her own body. 3 hours ago, she'd been Nia Cross, expelled student, grocery store clerk, invisible. Now she was Nia Cross, face of a civil rights complaint, voice on the news, symbol of everything wrong with a system that pretended to be fair while grinding people like her into dust. Her phone buzzed. Then again. Then it started vibrating continuously. Texts, calls, emails, all coming in a flood. She pulled it out and saw notifications stacking on top of each other faster than she could read them. Marcus glanced at her screen. "That's going to keep happening. I'd suggest turning your phone off for a few hours, or at least silencing it. The media frenzy is just beginning." But Nia scrolled through the notifications anyway, and what she saw made her chest tighten. Messages from former classmates she hadn't talked to in months, people from her neighborhood, even her old high school teachers. Most were supportive. "So proud of you. You're so brave. Yes, we're behind you." But some were ugly. "You're just making trouble. Why can't you accept consequences like everyone else? This is why they shouldn't let people like you into good schools. People like you." There it was again, that phrase that followed her like a shadow. "Don't read those," Celeste said gently, seeing Nia's expression. "Don't let strangers' opinions get in your head. You know what you did. You know why you're fighting. That's all that matters." Nia put her phone away and looked out the window at the city spread below. The same city where she'd knelt on Market Street 9 days ago, where she'd held pressure on a stranger's wound while everyone else kept walking, where she'd made a choice that had seemed so simple in the moment and turned out to cost everything. "Do you think we'll win?" she asked quietly. Marcus and Celeste exchanged a look. "Honestly," Marcus said, "I think we have a strong case. The evidence is solid, the pattern is clear, and public opinion is on our side. But universities have deep pockets and good lawyers, and they're very skilled at dragging these things out until people give up or settle quietly. This could take months, maybe years. But here's what I know," Celeste added. "We've already won something important. We've made it public. We've given voice to dozens of students who thought they were alone. We've forced Millbrook to defend itself in the court of public opinion. And whatever happens legally, they can't make this go away now. They can't pretend the problem doesn't exist. That's victory, even if it doesn't feel like it yet." Nia thought about the 43 emails. No, more than that now. The number had grown to 67 overnight, from students who'd reached out to say, "You're not the only one." She thought about James and his son, about Sarah and her grandmother, about Maria Gonzalez, and the car accident that ended her education. "I want to talk to Jennifer Walsh," Nia said suddenly, "the reporter from the Chronicle Herald. I want to tell her everything, not just my story, but all of their stories. Every student who reached out. I want people to see that this isn't about me. It's about a system that's been broken for years and nobody cared enough to fix it. Marcus nodded slowly. I'll set it up. But Nia, understand that once you do that interview, there's no taking it back. Your name is going to be everywhere. People are going to debate whether you're a hero or a troublemaker. Your life is going to be dissected by strangers who don't know you and don't care about the truth. I know, Nia said. And she did know. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, being safe, being quiet. But invisible and safe and quiet hadn't protected her. The system had come for her anyway, had crushed her anyway, had called her trash anyway, so maybe it was time to be loud. Set up the interview, she said again, as soon as possible, before Millbrook can spin this into something it's not. Celeste smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. That's the spirit. Now go home, rest, and prepare yourself. Tomorrow is going to be intense. Marcus drove Nia back to her apartment, and they rode in silence through streets that looked the same as always, but felt different somehow, charged with the knowledge that her face was probably already on news websites, her words being quoted and analyzed and picked apart by people who'd never stopped to help a stranger in their lives. When they pulled up to her building, Marcus turned to face her. Nia, I need you to understand something. This fight, it's going to change you. Maybe not in ways you can see right now, but it will. You're going to have to be strong in ways you never imagined. And there are going to be moments when you want to give up, when the cost seems too high, when a settlement looks like mercy instead of defeat. He paused. When those moments come, and they will come, I need you to remember why you're doing this. Not for the university, not even for yourself. For every student who comes after you. I will, Nia promised. She got out of the car and walked down the steps to her basement apartment, and only when she was inside with the door locked did she let herself feel the full weight of what had just happened. She'd stood in front of cameras and told her story. She'd accused a major university of discrimination. She'd made herself a target, and tomorrow the whole world would be watching to see what happened next. Her phone buzzed one more time. She almost ignored it, but the name on the screen made her look. Mom. The text was simple. I saw you on the news. I'm so proud of you. I love you. Come home tonight. You shouldn't be alone. Nia stared at those words until they blurred, and then she was crying. Not from fear or sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of being seen, being believed, being loved, even when everything else was falling apart. She texted back, I love you too. I'll be there soon. Then she turned off her phone, packed a small bag, and left the basement apartment that had been her prison for the past week. She took 2 buses to her mother's place on the east side, and when her mother opened the door and pulled her into a fierce hug, Nia finally felt like maybe, possibly, she wasn't fighting this alone after all. My brave girl, her mother whispered. My brave, beautiful girl. And for the first time since Dean Crow had shredded her documentation and called her trash, Nia Cross believed that maybe her mother was right. The response from Millbrook University came at 6:47 a.m., delivered via press release to every major news outlet before Nia even woke up. Her mother was already awake when Nia emerged from her childhood bedroom, sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and her face tight with controlled fury. You need to see this, her mother said, turning the screen so Nia could read. The headline across the university's official website read, Millbrook University Statement Regarding Recent Allegations. Below it, President Harold Westbrook's carefully crafted words appeared in official typeface, every syllable calculated for maximum defense and minimum accountability. Millbrook University takes all allegations of discrimination seriously and is committed to providing an equitable educational environment for all students. However, we strongly dispute the characterization of Ms. Cross's case as presented in yesterday's press conference. Ms. Cross was dismissed for violating clearly stated academic policy, not for any discriminatory reason. The university's exam attendance policy has been consistently enforced across all demographics and is essential to maintaining academic integrity. While we sympathize with Ms. Cross's difficult situation, the institution cannot make exceptions to establish policy based on emotional appeals or external pressure. Any suggestion that race played a role in this decision is unfounded and offensive to our diverse faculty and staff who work tirelessly to support students of all backgrounds. We will vigorously defend our policies and practices against these baseless accusations. Nia read it twice, feeling her stomach turn. They were doubling down. No acknowledgement of the pattern Marcus had documented. No explanation for the 47 white students who'd received exceptions. No mention of Dean Crow's threat letter. Just a flat denial wrapped in language about integrity and policy, painting her as an emotional manipulator making unfounded accusations. "They're calling you a liar," her mother said quietly. "In the most polite, legal way possible, but that's what they're doing." Nia's phone started buzzing, Marcus calling. She answered, and his voice came through tight with barely restrained anger. "Have you seen their statement? Just read it." "It's a mistake," Marcus said flatly. "A massive, catastrophic mistake. They just denied everything in writing, which means when we prove the pattern, and we will prove it, they won't be able to walk it back. They've committed to defending the indefensible." Papers rustled in the background. "I'm calling an emergency meeting with Mrs. Ashford and our investigative team. Can you get downtown by 9? "Yes." "What are we going to do?" "We're going to bury them in evidence," Marcus said. "They want to claim consistent enforcement? We'll show them what consistent enforcement actually looks like. And Nia, bring a list of every student who's contacted you. We're going public with their stories today." The meeting was held in Celeste's conference room, the same space where yesterday's press conference had transformed Nia from invisible to infamous. Now the long table was covered in documents, spreadsheets, student files, emails, testimony transcripts, creating a paper trail of discrimination that stretched back not 7 years but 12, further than even Marcus had initially investigated. Celeste stood at the head of the table, looking like she'd been up all night. Her hair was pulled back severely, her suit was different from yesterday, and there was a coffee cup in her hand that suggested this wasn't her first pot of the morning. "Millbrook made a choice," she said without preamble. They could have issued a neutral statement, bought themselves time, negotiated quietly. Instead, they publicly denied that race played any role in academic dismissals and claimed consistent policy enforcement. That was arrogant, and arrogance creates opportunity. A woman Nia hadn't met before spoke up from the other end of the table. She was Asian, middle-aged, with the look of someone who'd spent decades in courtrooms. "I'm Linda Huang, lead investigator for our Civil Rights Division. I've been going through Millbrook's academic records since the press conference yesterday. What I found is worse than we initially thought." She pulled up a presentation on the screen behind her. Numbers and graphs appeared, stark and damning. In the past 12 years, Millbrook University has academically dismissed 437 students. Of those, 308, 70%, were students of color. Students of color make up 31% of the student body, which means they're being dismissed at more than double their enrollment rate. Linda clicked to the next slide. "When we isolate for exam policy violations specifically, missed exams, late arrivals, academic integrity issues, the disparity becomes even more extreme. 114 students dismissed for exam violations. 103 were students of color. That's 90%. The room was silent except for the quiet sound of someone typing notes. "Now here's where it gets interesting," Linda continued. "I cross-referenced those dismissals with exception requests. Students who missed exams but were granted makeup opportunities. In that same 12-year period, 168 students were granted exceptions. 154 were white, 11 were Asian, 3 were international students from wealthy families. 0 were black, 0 were Hispanic, 0 were Native American." Nia felt the number hit her like a physical blow. Not just a pattern, a wall. Absolute segregation dressed up as policy. "How is that even possible?" Nia asked. "How do they explain that?" "They don't," Marcus said grimly, "because they've never had to. No one was looking at the data comprehensively until now. Individual students got dismissed, filed appeals, maybe complained to friends, but without someone collecting all those stories in one place, it just looked like bad luck. Individual cases, not systemic discrimination." "But we have it now," Celeste said. "All of it. Documented, verified, undeniable. The question is how we use it." Linda clicked to another slide. this one showing a timeline of dismissals overlaid with university donor contributions. There's another factor here. I mapped major donations against dismissal rates, and there's a correlation. In years when the university received significant funding from conservative donors or alumni groups, dismissals of students of color increased by an average of 18%. It's not conclusive proof of causation, but it suggests that certain board members or administrators may have been responding to external pressure to maintain a certain standard, which appears to be code for keeping enrollment demographics favorable to traditional donors. So they were essentially purging students of color to please racist donors, Naya said, her voice hollow. We can't prove intent without internal communications, Marcus cautioned, but we can prove impact, and legally, disparate impact is sufficient for a discrimination claim even without proving intentional bias. Celeste turned to Nia. How many students have contacted you now? 83, Nia said, as of this morning. Some are former students willing to go public. Others are current students who are scared of retaliation but want their stories included anonymously. We can work with that, Marcus said. Anonymous testimony is admissible in civil rights complaints, especially when there's documented fear of retaliation. And speaking of retaliation, he pulled out another document. Dean Crow sent 3 more letters yesterday. One to a current student named Marcus Johnson, who posted about Nia's case on social media, threatening disciplinary action for spreading misinformation. One to a professor who spoke supportively about the discrimination complaint in class, suggesting he was creating a hostile environment for white students. And one to the student newspaper, threatening to pull university funding if they ran a story about the case. She's panicking, Linda observed. Powerful people make mistakes when they panic. She's also giving us more evidence, Celeste added. Every threat, every attempt to silence students or faculty, every heavy-handed response, it all supports our retaliation claim. She looked at Nia. But it also means things are going to get worse before they get better. Dean Crow is doubling down because she knows if she loses this fight, her career is over. She's going to come at you with everything she has. Let her, Naya said, surprised by the steel in her own voice. I'm not signing an NDA. I'm not going away quietly. And I'm definitely not letting her intimidate other students into silence. Marcus smiled slightly. Good, because Jennifer Walsh's investigation runs in the Chronicle Herald tomorrow morning. She's been coordinating with our team, and her story includes testimony from 23 students, names, dates, specifics. It's going to be devastating for Millbrook's defense. Tomorrow morning, Celeste said, we also have a scheduled hearing with the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights. They've expedited our case based on the strength of evidence and public interest. That's extremely rare. It usually takes months to get a hearing date, but the media attention has made this a priority. What happens at the hearing? Nia asked. We present our evidence. The university presents their defense. The OCR panel asks questions and reviews documentation. Then they make a preliminary determination about whether there's sufficient cause to launch a formal investigation. Marcus paused. If they rule in our favor, the university faces federal scrutiny, potential loss of funding, and massive pressure to settle. If they rule against us, we can still pursue a private lawsuit, but it becomes harder. What are our chances? With this evidence, 90%, Linda said confidently. The pattern is too clear, the numbers too stark. The only way we lose is if the university can produce compelling evidence that every single one of those dismissals was justified on non-discriminatory grounds. And given that they've already claimed consistent enforcement, they've backed themselves into a corner. They can't have it both ways. Celeste checked her watch. The hearing is at 2 p.m. tomorrow. Nia, you'll need to testify. Marcus will prep you this afternoon. In the meantime, we're holding another press conference at noon today to release Linda's findings. The university issued their denial at dawn before most people were awake. We're responding while the news cycle is still hot. They're trying to control the narrative, Marcus added. We're going to shred that narrative with facts. The second press conference was even more crowded than the first. Word had spread overnight, not just among journalists, but among students, activists, education policy advocates, and people who'd never heard of Millbrook University but recognized the story of institutional discrimination because they'd lived variations of it themselves. The conference room was standing room only, cameras lining the back wall, reporters packed so tightly that security had to turn people away at the door. Linda Huang presented the findings with the clinical precision of someone who'd spent a career making cases that couldn't be argued away. Numbers on the screen behind her, charts showing dismissal rates by race, timelines correlating donor influence with enforcement patterns. Every slide was another nail in Millbrook's coffin. The university claims consistent policy enforcement, Linda said, her voice carrying across the packed room. The data tells a different story. The data tells the story of a system that consistently and overwhelmingly punishes students of color while protecting white students. This isn't about a few bad decisions. This is about institutional culture that has decided which students deserve grace and which students deserve expulsion. Questions erupted before Linda even finished speaking. One reporter stood, not waiting to be called on. Michael Torres, National Education Report. You're alleging that Millbrook University has essentially been running a segregated academic discipline system for over a decade. That's an extraordinary claim. How do you respond to critics who might say you're cherry-picking data or misinterpreting legitimate policy enforcement? I'd invite those critics to look at the data themselves, Linda replied calmly. We've made our full analysis available to the Department of Education, and we're prepared to make it available to any independent auditor. The pattern isn't subtle, it's overwhelming. 0 black students granted exam exceptions in 12 years, despite dozens of documented requests. That's not policy. That's discrimination. Another reporter stood. Sarah Kim, Education Weekly. I'm looking at your timeline slide showing increased dismissals correlating with conservative donor contributions. Are you suggesting the university was deliberately expelling students of color to satisfy racist donors? Marcus stepped up to the microphone. We're suggesting that external pressures influenced internal decisions. Whether that influence was deliberate or unconscious doesn't change the outcome. Students of color were systematically denied opportunities that white students received. That's the legal definition of discrimination. But what about academic standards? A male voice called from the back. Shouldn't universities be able to enforce high standards without being accused of racism? Celeste took the microphone, and her voice cut through the room like ice. Absolutely. Universities should enforce high standards. But standards applied selectively based on race aren't standards at all. They're weapons. When a white student who slept through an exam because of a hangover gets a makeup opportunity, but a black student whose son was in the emergency room gets expelled, that's not about standards. That's about who the institution values and who it doesn't. The room went quiet for a beat, and then Jennifer Walsh stood, her notebook open. Jennifer Walsh, Chronicle Herald. My investigation has uncovered testimony from 23 current and former students describing similar patterns of discriminatory treatment. One student told me that Dean Crow explicitly said to her, "Students like you need to work twice as hard to prove you belong here." Is that kind of explicit bias documented in your findings? Yes, Linda said. We have multiple testimonies describing explicitly racial comments from administrators, including Dean Crow. Those testimonies are included in our OCR complaint. And before anyone asks, yes, these students are willing to testify under oath. Niall watched from her chair at the side of the room, feeling the weight of all those stories. 83 students now, maybe more by tomorrow. An entire community of people who'd been hurt by the same system and told their hurt didn't matter, told they were imagining bias, told they should have worked harder or planned better, or simply accepted that this was how things were. A reporter in the front row stood, and Naya recognized him from yesterday. Tom Bradford, the one who'd asked if the university was just enforcing policy consistently. Tom Bradford, Metro News. Miss Cross, you've been relatively quiet during these proceedings. How do you feel about becoming the face of this movement? Do you feel the pressure of representing all these other students? Every camera swung toward Nia. Marcus gave her a subtle nod, your choice whether to answer. Nia stood slowly, her legs steadier than they'd been yesterday. She'd spent last night at her mother's apartment reading every single email from students who'd reached out, absorbing their stories until they felt like her own. She'd cried over some of them, gotten angry over others. And somewhere in the long hours before dawn, she'd stopped feeling like she was fighting for herself and started feeling like she was fighting for them. I don't think of myself as the face of a movement, Nia said quietly. I think of myself as one person who refused to stay silent when something wrong happened. But yeah, I feel the pressure. I feel it every time another student emails me saying, "This happened to me too." Every time someone tells me they thought they were crazy for thinking race played a role. Every time I hear a story about someone who gave up, who dropped out, who believed the university when they were told they weren't good enough. She paused, gathering her thoughts. I saved a woman's life. That's not heroic. That's just being human. The fact that I got punished for it says something about what this university values. But the fact that dozens of other students got punished for being sick or having family emergencies or being human in ways that didn't fit the university's idea of acceptable, that says something even worse. It says the system is designed to fail certain people, and I'm not going to stop fighting until that system changes. The room was silent when she finished. Then someone started clapping, a student in the back, probably a journalist's intern. The applause spread, awkward and sparse at first, then building until half the room was clapping and cameras were capturing the moment when Nia Cross, 19-year-old expelled student, became something more than a victim. After the press conference ended, Marcus pulled Nia aside in the hallway outside the conference room. His expression was serious. That was good, really good. But I need to prepare you for what's coming next. He glanced around to make sure they weren't overheard. The hearing tomorrow is going to be brutal. The university's lawyers will try to discredit you personally. They'll bring up every mistake you've ever made, every grade that wasn't perfect, every time you were late to class. They'll try to paint you as someone who is looking for an excuse to fail, who used the Market Street incident as a convenient excuse. But I have documentation, Nia protested. The paramedics report, the hospital records, which they'll argue could have been obtained after the fact. They'll suggest you knew you were going to fail the exam and staged the whole thing. Marcus held up a hand before Nia could explode. I know it's absurd. I know it's offensive, but that's what they're going to do because it's their only defense. If they can make you look unreliable or manipulative, they can argue that the discrimination pattern doesn't matter because you specifically weren't a good faith victim. How do I fight that? You tell the truth. Simply, directly, without embellishment. You don't get defensive, you don't get angry, you just state facts. Marcus pulled out a folder. We're going to spend the next 4 hours doing mock testimony. I'm going to ask you every awful question they might ask, and we're going to practice your responses until they're second nature. It's not fun, but it's necessary. They spent the rest of the afternoon in a small office, Marcus playing the role of hostile attorney while Celeste and Linda took notes. They asked about her grades, her attendance, her financial situation. They implied she'd been looking for a way out of the exam. They suggested she'd exaggerated the severity of Celeste's injuries. They even brought up her mother's work history, implying that Nia had learned to manipulate systems from a family culture of seeking handouts. Each question felt like a slap, but Nia forced herself to answer calmly, factually, without the emotion that threatened to choke her. By the time they finished, she was exhausted and her voice was hoarse, but Marcus looked satisfied. Good, he said. You're ready. Remember, they're going to try to make you angry or defensive because emotional responses look unreliable. Stay calm, stay factual, and trust that the evidence speaks for itself. Nia went home that night, back to her basement apartment, not her mother's place, because she needed the solitude to prepare mentally for tomorrow. She reviewed her notes, practiced her testimony one more time, and tried not to think about how her entire future rested on a hearing room full of strangers who would decide whether her story mattered. Her phone buzzed around 10 p.m. A text from an unknown number. You're making a mistake. Drop the complaint and we can all move on. Keep pushing and you'll regret it. Nia stared at the message, her hands trembling. She forwarded it to Marcus, who responded immediately. Screenshot everything. File a police report if you feel unsafe. I'm notifying OCR about ongoing intimidation. Another text came through, different number. I was there on Market Street. I saw what really happened. You ignored that woman for 10 minutes while you were on your phone. Stop lying. Nia's breath caught. That was categorically false. She dropped everything the moment she saw Celeste. But the accusation was out there now, another piece of doubt being planted in the public consciousness. More texts followed, a barrage from different numbers. Race card won't save you. You're destroying a good school because you couldn't handle the work. We know where you live. That last one made her stomach drop. She called Marcus, who answered immediately, despite the late hour. I'm getting threats, Nia said, trying to keep her voice steady. Multiple numbers. Some are accusing me of lying about what happened on Market Street, One knows my address. I'm calling the police right now and filing for a protective order, Marcus said. She heard him typing rapidly. Forward me every message. Don't respond to any of them. And Naya? Pack a bag. Mrs. Ashford has a secure guest room at her house. You're staying there tonight. I can't just... Yes, you can. This is escalating, and I'm not taking chances with your safety. Marcus's voice was firm. A car will be at your apartment in 20 minutes. Pack enough for a few days. We're not letting them intimidate you into silence. The car arrived exactly 20 minutes later. A private security vehicle with a driver who introduced himself as Thomas and helped her load her hastily packed bags. They drove through the city to a neighborhood Nia had only seen from bus windows, where houses had gates and security systems and the kind of quiet that money bought. Celeste met her at the door, still dressed despite the late hour, her face tight with controlled fury. I saw the messages Marcus forwarded me, Celeste said, ushering Nia inside. This is unacceptable. We're filing additional complaints for harassment and witness intimidation first thing tomorrow morning. The guest room was bigger than Nia's entire basement apartment, with a bathroom that had heated floors and water pressure that actually worked. It should have felt luxurious, but instead Nia felt dislocated, like she'd stepped into someone else's life. Celeste sat on the edge of the bed while Nia unpacked. I know this is overwhelming. I know you probably feel like your life has spiraled completely out of your control, but I need you to understand something. She waited until Nia looked at her. They're doing this because they're losing. The threats, the intimidation, the fake witnesses, these are acts of desperation. If they had a legitimate defense, they wouldn't need to resort to this. What if they succeed? Nia asked quietly. What if people believe the lies? Some people will, Celeste said honestly. Some people will always believe the institution over the individual, the powerful over the vulnerable. But the evidence doesn't lie. The numbers don't lie. And the Department of Education doesn't make determinations based on threatening text messages. They make them based on facts. I'm scared, Nia admitted. I've never been this scared in my life. Good, Celeste said. Fear means you understand the stakes. But don't let fear make you small. Don't let it silence you. Because right now, you're fighting not just for yourself, but for every student who comes after you. And that's worth being scared for. Nia barely slept that night, her mind racing through testimony practice and threat messages and the crushing weight of representing 83 other people's stories. When dawn finally came, she got up, showered in the guest bathroom with its heated floors and expensive toiletries, and put on the outfit Marcus had told her to wear. Professional but not too formal, modest but not apologetic, clothes that said, I belong in this room and deserve to be heard. The hearing was scheduled for 2 p.m. at the Federal Building downtown. Marcus arrived at Celeste's house at noon to do final prep, running through testimony one last time while Celeste made phone calls to coordinate with their legal team. Remember, Marcus said as they drove downtown, this isn't a trial. It's an administrative hearing. The OCR panel is there to determine if there's sufficient evidence to warrant a formal investigation. They're not deciding guilt or innocence. They're deciding if the case has merit. What if they decide it doesn't? Then we file a private lawsuit and fight it in court. But Naya, with the evidence we have, I'd be shocked if OCR doesn't find merit. The only question is how strongly they find it. They arrived at the federal building 30 minutes early. The hearing room was smaller than Nia had imagined, more like a conference room than a courtroom, with a long table for the OCR panel, smaller tables for each side, and chairs for witnesses. Millbrook's legal team was already there, 5 attorneys in expensive suits arranging documents with the confidence of people who'd won more fights than they'd lost. And sitting in the back row, arms crossed and expression hard as stone, was Dean Vivian Crow. Their eyes met across the room, and Naya felt that familiar cold certainty settling in her stomach. The understanding that this woman wasn't going to give an inch, that she'd burn the whole university down before admitting she'd been wrong. Don't look at her, Marcus murmured. Don't give her the satisfaction. The OCR panel filed in at exactly 2 p.m. 3 people, 2 women and a man, carrying thick folders and wearing expressions of careful neutrality. The lead panelist, a woman in her 50s with gray hair and sharp eyes, introduced herself as Dr. Patricia Morrison, Director of the Office for Civil Rights Regional Division. This hearing is convened to evaluate the discrimination complaint filed by Nia Cross against Millbrook University, Dr. Morrison said, her voice formal and precise. We will hear testimony from both parties, review submitted evidence, and make a preliminary determination regarding the merit of this complaint. Miss Cross, you may begin. Nia stood, her legs shaky but holding. Marcus had coached her on this moment. Speak clearly, make eye contact, don't rush. She walked to the witness chair and sat, acutely aware of every eye in the room on her. My name is Nia Cross, she began, her voice steadier than she felt. I was a nursing student at Millbrook University with a 3.97 GPA and perfect attendance. On the morning of my pharmacology final, I was walking to campus when I saw a woman bleeding to death on the sidewalk. 50 people walked past her. I stopped. I performed life-saving first aid until the ambulance arrived. I was 7 minutes late to my exam. The door was locked. I was expelled. She paused, letting those facts settle. Then she continued, walking through every detail. The incident report Dean Crow had shredded, the scholarship revoked within hours, the threat letter when she filed a complaint. She spoke without emotion, just facts, just truth, the way Marcus had taught her. When she finished, the lead attorney for Millbrook stood. He was older, silver-haired, with the kind of smooth confidence that came from never having been poor or scared or desperate. Miss Cross, he said, his tone suggesting sympathy he didn't feel, you've painted a very compelling picture of yourself as a victim. But let's examine the facts more carefully, shall we? And then the real fight began. The attorney's name was Richard Thornton, and he approached the witness stand with the measured grace of a predator who'd cornered easier prey before. His smile was professional, his tone respectful. But Nia could see the calculation behind his eyes. He was looking for the crack in her story, the moment of doubt he could exploit into reasonable uncertainty. Miss Cross, you testified that you had a 3.97 GPA before this incident. Impressive. But isn't it true that your pharmacology grade had been slipping in the weeks prior to the final exam? Nia kept her voice level. I had an 89% going into the final. That's a B+, not slipping. An 89%, Thornton repeated, as if the number proved something sinister. And the final exam was worth 40% of your grade, correct? So you would have needed to score quite well to maintain your scholarship GPA requirement. I was prepared for the exam. I'd studied for 2 weeks. Yet you were walking to campus over 2 hours early. That seems excessive for someone who was confident in their preparation. Marcus started to stand, but Nia spoke first. I took the early bus because I couldn't afford to be late. Students like me don't get second chances. The phrase hung in the air, students like me, and Nia saw Thornton's jaw tighten slightly. He'd wanted to make her defensive, not defiant. Let's talk about what happened on Market Street, Thornton continued, shifting tactics. You claim you provided life-saving care to Mrs. Ashford, but you're not a licensed medical professional, are you? I'm a nursing student trained in emergency first aid and CPR. A student, not a professional. So when you made the decision to stop and intervene, you were effectively practicing medicine without a license, weren't you? I was saving someone's life, Nia said, her voice hardening despite Marcus's warnings to stay calm. That's not practicing medicine. That's being human. But you made a choice. You chose to stop knowing you might miss your exam. You chose to prioritize a stranger over your educational obligations. Thornton leaned forward slightly. Some might say that demonstrates poor judgment, an inability to properly prioritize competing demands. Dr. Morrison interrupted, her voice sharp. Counselor, are you seriously suggesting that stopping to help a dying person demonstrates poor judgment? Thornton didn't miss a beat. I'm suggesting that Miss Cross had options. She could have called 911 and continued to her exam. She could have ensured someone else was helping before she committed to staying. She made a choice that had consequences, and now she's asking this panel to absolve her of those consequences by claiming discrimination. I made the only choice I could live with, Nia said quietly, and the university punished me for it while giving white students exceptions for hangovers and car troubles and panic attacks. That's not about my judgment. That's about their values. Thornton pulled out a document. Let's examine those so-called exceptions. You've claimed that 47 students received makeup exam opportunities over 5 years, but you're comparing very different circumstances. Tyler Brennan, for instance, the student you've repeatedly mentioned, Missed his exam due to documented food poisoning, not a hangover. That's not what the student rumor was, Naya started, but Thornton cut her off smoothly. Student rumors. Exactly. Hearsay and gossip, not facts. The documented reason for Mr. Brennan's absence was medical illness, verified by the Student Health Center, just as Ashley Morrison's car breakdown was verified by a police report, and Kimberly Hart's panic attack was documented by a psychiatrist. These students provided proper documentation through proper channels before or immediately after their absences. You did not, because I was covered in someone else's blood and being told I was trash, Nia shot back, her composure cracking slightly. Dean Crow shredded my documentation. She refused to verify my story with the hospital. She expelled me within hours before I could even... The documentation you're referring to was a handwritten note from a paramedic, not an official medical report. It could have been written by anyone. Thornton's voice was maddeningly calm. The university has standards for documentation precisely to prevent fraudulent claims. You failed to meet those standards. Marcus stood. If I may address the panel directly, the documentation requirement Mr. Thornton is referencing doesn't appear anywhere in the official university handbook. It's being applied retroactively to justify Miss Cross's dismissal. The 47 students we've identified received exceptions with varying levels of documentation, some with nothing more than verbal explanations. The only consistent factor in who received grace and who didn't is race. Thornton turned to face Marcus. That's a serious accusation unsupported by evidence. Correlation is not causation, counselor. You're seeing discrimination where there's merely the neutral application of policy. Neutral? Linda Huang stood, her voice cutting through the room like ice. I've analyzed 12 years of academic dismissals. 0 black students granted exam exceptions. 0 Hispanic students. 0 Native American students. 154 white students granted the same exceptions. If that's neutral, then the word has lost all meaning. Thornton opened his mouth to respond, but Dr. Morrison held up her hand. I think we've heard enough on this particular point. Mr. Thornton, does your client have any explanation for the statistical disparity in exception grants? We dispute the methodology of that analysis, Thornton said smoothly. Each case was evaluated individually based on its specific merits. The fact that outcomes correlate with race doesn't prove discrimination. It may simply reflect differences in the quality of documentation or the severity of circumstances. So your position is that black students consistently provide worse documentation and have less severe emergencies? Dr. Morrison's tone suggested she found this explanation as insulting as Naya did. Our position is that Miss Cross's case was handled according to policy, and any statistical analysis attempting to prove a broader pattern of discrimination is flawed in both methodology and interpretation. The hearing continued for another 90 minutes. Thornton systematically attacking every piece of evidence while Marcus and Linda defended each point with data and testimony. Thornton brought up every student who'd been dismissed regardless of race, arguing that the university was tough but fair. Marcus countered with specific examples of white students who'd received multiple exceptions while students of color were expelled for single infractions. Back and forth, thrust and parry, a legal dance that would determine whether Naya's story mattered or whether she was just another student who'd failed to meet standards. Finally, Dr. Morrison called for a recess. The panel will review the submitted evidence and testimony. We'll reconvene in 1 hour with our preliminary determination. The hour felt like a year. Nia sat in a small waiting room with Marcus and Celeste, unable to eat the sandwich someone had brought, unable to focus on anything except the weight of everything that had led to this moment. 83 students waiting for her to succeed, her mother working doubles to pay for an apartment Nia might lose anyway, a future that hung on whether 3 strangers believed her story mattered more than a university's reputation. You did well in there, Marcus said quietly. Better than well. You stayed calm, you stuck to facts, and you didn't let Thornton rattle you. He called me a liar in every way except using the actual word, Nia said hollowly. He tried. But the evidence speaks louder than his rhetoric. Celeste checked her phone. Jennifer Walsh's investigation went live an hour ago. It's already the most read story on the Chronicle Herald's website. 23 students on the record, names and photos. The public response is overwhelming. That won't matter if the panel rules against us. It matters regardless, Celeste said firmly, because even if we lose today, we've exposed something that was hidden for years. We've given voice to students who thought they were alone. We've started a conversation about who deserves grace and who deserves punishment. That's not nothing, Nia. That's everything. The door opened and a clerk informed them the panel was ready. They filed back into the hearing room where Thornton and his team looked confident, Dean Crow looked vindicated, and the three panelists looked inscrutable. Dr. Morrison cleared her throat and began reading from a prepared statement, her voice formal and precise. The Office for Civil Rights has reviewed the evidence and testimony presented in the matter of Nia Cross versus Millbrook University. We have examined academic dismissal records, exception grant documentation, comparative case analyses, and statistical data covering a 12-year period. We have also considered the specific circumstances of Miss Cross's dismissal and the university's response to her complaint. She paused, and Nia felt her heart hammering so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Based on our review, we find that there is substantial evidence of discriminatory enforcement of academic policies at Millbrook University. The statistical disparity in exception grants, 0 students of color receiving exam makeup opportunities versus 154 white students over 12 years, constitutes a pattern that cannot be explained by neutral policy application. The university's failure to provide any compelling justification for this disparity, combined with documented instances of retaliatory behavior against complainants, supports a finding of systemic discrimination. Nia heard the words but couldn't quite process them. Substantial evidence. Pattern of discrimination. The room seemed to tilt slightly. Accordingly, we are opening a formal investigation into Millbrook University's academic dismissal practices, with particular focus on exam policy enforcement and exception grant procedures. The university will be required to preserve all relevant records, cooperate fully with investigators, and implement no further dismissals under current policies pending the completion of our investigation. Additionally, we are ordering the immediate reinstatement of Miss Cross with full scholarship restoration while this investigation proceeds. The room exploded. Thornton was on his feet objecting. Marcus was standing. Celeste grabbed Nia's hand and squeezed hard enough to hurt. Dean Crow's face had gone white, then red, her mouth opening and closing like she was trying to speak, but couldn't find words. Dr. Morrison raised her voice over the chaos. This is a preliminary finding, not a final determination. However, the weight of evidence presented today warrants immediate intervention. Ms. Cross will be reinstated to her previous status effective immediately. The university will provide written confirmation of this reinstatement within 48 hours. Are there any questions? Thornton was already gathering his papers, his face tight with controlled fury. We will be appealing this decision through every available channel. This panel has overstepped its authority, and you have the right to appeal, Dr. Morrison interrupted calmly. But until that appeal is heard and ruled upon, our order stands. Miss Cross is to be treated as a current student in good standing with all associated rights and privileges. Any retaliation or obstruction will result in additional sanctions. She looked directly at Dean Crow. Do I make myself clear? Dean Crow stood slowly, and for the first time since Nia had met her, the woman looked uncertain. This is a travesty. Miss Cross violated clear policy, and this panel is rewarding her for— Dean Crow, Dr. Morrison's voice went cold. I strongly suggest you consult with legal counsel before making any further statements. Your threat letter to Miss Cross is currently being reviewed for potential criminal charges of witness intimidation. Any additional comments you make in this proceeding may be used against you. Do you understand? The room went silent. Dean Crow's mouth snapped shut, her face flushing darker. She grabbed her briefcase and walked out, her heels clicking against the floor in sharp, angry percussion. The university's legal team followed, leaving only Marcus, Celeste, Linda, Nia, and the panel in the room. Dr. Morrison's expression softened slightly as she looked at Nia. Miss Cross, I want to be clear about what this means. You're being reinstated, but the larger investigation will take months. During that time, you may face hostility from faculty or administration. If you experience any retaliation, any at all, you report it immediately to our office. We take this very seriously. I understand, Nia managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you. Don't thank me. Thank yourself for having the courage to fight back. Dr. Morrison gathered her papers. And Miss Cross? What you did on Market Street, stopping to help someone when no one else would. That's the kind of person who should be a nurse. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. The hearing ended, and suddenly Nia was in the hallway being hugged by Celeste and Marcus, surrounded by the small team of lawyers and investigators who'd built the case that had just blown apart a university's carefully constructed defense. Someone was crying. Linda, tough, unflappable Linda, wiping tears from her eyes and saying, "We did it. We actually did it," like she'd doubted until this moment. Nia's phone started buzzing, text messages flooding in from the 83 students, now 97, the number still growing, who'd been waiting for news. From her mother, from old teachers, from strangers who'd read Jennifer Walsh's investigation and wanted Nia to know she wasn't alone. The messages blurred together into a chorus of celebration and relief and righteous anger finally validated. Marcus was already on his phone with someone from the university's board of trustees, his voice professional but edged with victory. Yes, that's correct. OCR has ordered immediate reinstatement. Miss Cross will be returning to campus this week. No, actually, given the findings of systemic discrimination, I think it's in everyone's best interest if we discuss a broader resolution. Compensation for damages, policy reform, independent oversight committee. I'm sure we can work something out that avoids a lengthy federal investigation. He hung up and turned to Nia. The board wants to meet. They're already trying to contain the damage. What do they want? To settle. To make this go away as quietly as possible. Marcus smiled grimly. But we're not interested in quiet anymore, are we? The settlement negotiations took 3 weeks of back and forth, during which Nia returned to campus as a reinstated student and discovered what it felt like to walk through spaces that had expelled her. Some students congratulated her. Others avoided her eyes, uncomfortable with the disruption she represented. Faculty were split, some supportive, others resentful that their institution was being investigated. Dean Crow was placed on administrative leave pending the OCR investigation. The announcement came via email, neutral and bureaucratic, but everyone knew what it meant. Her threat letter had been forwarded to the district attorney's office, and while criminal charges were unlikely, her career at Millbrook was effectively over. Nia attended her first class back, pharmacology, with Dr. Wells, who looked uncomfortable when Nia walked in but said nothing. The other students stared. Some whispered. But when Dr. Wells asked a question about drug interactions and Nia raised her hand to answer, her voice was steady and her knowledge was sharp, and she belonged there just as much as anyone else in that room. The final settlement was reached on a Wednesday morning in Celeste's conference room, the same space where this whole fight had begun with a press conference and a promise to make things right. President Westbrook was there, looking older than he had in official photos, flanked by lawyers and board members who'd decided that fighting was more expensive than fixing. Marcus laid out the terms with the precision of someone who'd negotiated from a position of strength. Nia Cross will be reinstated with full scholarship, plus an additional stipend of $50,000 for damages, pain and suffering, and lost wages. Her academic record will be cleared of any reference to disciplinary action. She will be permitted to retake her pharmacology final with no penalty. Agreed, one of the board members said quickly. The university will implement a new academic exception policy, drafted in consultation with civil rights experts and subject to independent oversight. This policy will include mandatory training for all faculty and administrators on implicit bias and equitable policy enforcement. Agreed. All students dismissed under the previous exam policy in the past 10 years will have their cases reviewed by an independent committee. Those found to have been discriminated against will be offered reinstatement, scholarship restoration, or financial compensation as appropriate. The board members exchanged glances. This was the expensive part, the acknowledgement that the problem was bigger than one student. How many students are we talking about? Based on our analysis, approximately 128, Linda said. Not all will want to return. Some have moved on, built other lives, but they deserve the option. That's going to cost millions, a board member protested. Discriminating against students for 12 years already cost you your reputation, Celeste said coldly. This is the price of buying it back. You can pay it willingly, or we can let the federal investigation proceed and see what else they find. Your choice." President Westbrook rubbed his face, looking exhausted. "We'll agree to the review process, but we need time to implement these changes properly." "You have 6 months," Marcus said. "After that, if the OCR investigation finds you haven't made adequate progress, the sanctions will be severe. Loss of federal funding, accreditation review, the works." 6 months, Westbrook repeated. He looked at Nia, and for the first time his expression held something like genuine remorse. "Miss Cross, I want to apologize. What happened to you was wrong. The system failed you, and as the leader of this institution, that failure is ultimately my responsibility. I can't undo the harm you've suffered, but I can promise that we will do better." Nia studied him, trying to determine if the apology was sincere or just another piece of institutional theater. She thought about all the students who'd never received apologies, who'd been dismissed and forgotten and told their pain didn't matter. She thought about James and his son, about Maria and her car accident, about all the voices that had been silenced until she'd refused to stay silent. "I don't want promises," Nia said quietly. "I want action. I want every student who contacts your office with an emergency to be treated like a human being, not a policy violation. I want faculty trained to understand that grace isn't weakness and compassion isn't a loophole. I want the next Black student who has to choose between saving a life and saving their future to know that the university will support them, not punish them." "You'll have that," Westbrook said. "You have my word?" "Your word isn't enough." Nia pulled out a document she and Marcus had prepared. "This is a consent decree. It makes every promise you just made legally binding. It establishes an independent oversight committee with power to review any academic dismissal for potential bias. It creates a reporting mechanism for students to confidentially report discrimination without fear of retaliation, and it requires annual public reporting on dismissal rates broken down by demographic data." She slid the document across the table. "Sign this and we have a deal. Refuse, and we'll see you in court." The board members read through the decree, faces grim. It was comprehensive, demanding, and it stripped away their ability to enforce policies in the shadows. One board member started to object, but Westbrook held up a hand. "We'll sign it," he said heavily. "All of it. Whatever it takes to make this right." The signing took 20 minutes, each board member and administrator adding their name to a document that would reshape how Millbrook University treated its most vulnerable students. When it was done, Marcus stood and shook Westbrook's hand with professional coldness. "The decree will be filed with the court and become part of the public record," Marcus said. "Any violation will result in immediate contempt proceedings. I suggest you take it seriously." "We will," Westbrook said. He turned to leave, then paused. "Miss Cross? For what it's worth, I think you're going to be an excellent nurse, the kind of person who stops when others walk by. That's rare. Don't lose it." After they left, Nia sat in the conference room with Celeste and Marcus and Linda, all of them too exhausted to celebrate immediately. They'd won. They'd actually won. But victory felt different than Nia had imagined. Quieter, heavier, tinged with the knowledge of how much had been broken before they could fix it. "How do you feel?" Celeste asked gently. "Tired," Nia admitted, and angry that it took all this, lawyers and press conferences and federal investigations, just to be treated fairly. "It shouldn't be this hard." "No," Celeste agreed. "It shouldn't, but you made it possible for the next student, and the one after that. That's not nothing." Over the following months, Nia watched the changes take root at Millbrook University. The independent review committee was established, headed by a civil rights attorney and 2 education equity experts. They worked through the backlog of dismissals, identifying students who'd been treated unfairly. James Porter was contacted and offered full reinstatement with financial compensation for the semester he'd lost. Maria Gonzalez, who'd moved across the country after her dismissal, received a settlement and a formal apology. One by one, the 128 students were reviewed, and 73 were found to have been discriminated against. Not all returned. Some had built new lives, found different paths. But they received justice in the form of cleared records, financial compensation, and institutional acknowledgement that they'd been wronged. The new exception policy was implemented with mandatory training for all faculty. Nia attended one of the sessions and watched professors squirm as the trainer walked through case studies showing how bias influenced decision-making. Dr. Wells was there, and afterward she approached Nia in the hallway. "I owe you an apology," Dr. Wells said quietly. "I should have fought for you. I should have questioned why the policy was being enforced so rigidly for you when I'd seen exceptions made for other students. I was complicit in a system I knew was wrong, and I'm sorry. It wasn't enough. Apologies never quite balanced the scales, but it was something." Nia accepted it with a nod and moved on, because she had a makeup exam to take and a degree to finish. She retook the pharmacology final 3 months after the original date, in the same classroom where she'd once watched through locked doors as her future slipped away. This time she walked through those doors, sat at a desk, and completed the exam with the confidence of someone who'd fought for the right to be there. She scored a 96% highest in the class, and when Dr. Wells handed back the graded exams, she met Nia's eyes and smiled. "Welcome back, Miss Cross." Nia graduated 18 months later at the top of her nursing class, wearing the same scrubs she'd worn on Market Street. She'd kept them, bloodstains and all, as a reminder of the cost of compassion. Her mother sat in the audience crying proud tears, and Celeste was there too, her arm still bearing a faint scar from the injury that had started everything. The graduation speaker was President Westbrook, and he devoted half his speech to the importance of equity and inclusion, to learning from mistakes, to building an institution that valued every student. Nia listened and wondered if he believed his own words, or if they were just the performance required of someone trying to rebuild a damaged reputation. Maybe it didn't matter. The policies were in place. The oversight was real. The next student who stopped to save a life wouldn't face what she had faced. After the ceremony, Nia stood in the campus courtyard surrounded by family and friends and the small army of lawyers and advocates who'd fought alongside her. Jennifer Walsh was there taking photos for a follow-up story. Marcus was already fielding calls from other universities asking for consulting on their own discrimination issues. Linda was deep in conversation with a board member about expanding the review to other institutions. And Celeste stood slightly apart, watching everything with the satisfaction of someone who'd promised to fix a broken system and actually followed through. "You did it," Celeste said when Nia joined her. "You're a nurse now. The thing they tried to take from you, you have it back." "We did it," Nia corrected. "I couldn't have fought this alone." "Maybe not, but you started it. You refused to stay silent when silence was easier. That took a kind of courage most people never find." Celeste smiled. "So what's next? Where does Nurse Cross go from here?" Nia looked out at the campus that had expelled her and then been forced to take her back, at the students walking past in their graduation gowns, at the future spreading out in front of her like an open road. She thought about all the emails she still received from students at other universities, from people facing their own battles with systems designed to defeat them, from young black girls who'd read her story and needed to know that fighting back was possible. "I don't know exactly," Nia said honestly, "but I know I want to work in emergency medicine. I want to be the person who stops when everyone else walks by, and I want to help other students fight back when institutions try to punish them for being human." "That sounds perfect," Celeste said, "and if you ever need legal support for those fights, you know where to find me." 1 year after graduation, Nia was working the emergency room at Mercy General, the same hospital where Celeste had been taken after Market Street. She was 3 weeks into her job when a patient came in, a young black man with a chart that said he'd been found unconscious on a city bus. The attending physician was ready to dismiss him as just another drug case, but something about his presentation didn't fit. Nia pushed back, insisting they run a full toxicology panel, and discovered he was having a diabetic crisis, not an overdose. They saved his life because Nia had refused to accept the easy, biased diagnosis. The attending pulled her aside after the patient was stabilized. "That was good instincts, Cross. You saw something everyone else missed." "I've learned that what everyone else sees isn't always the truth," Nia said. "Sometimes you have to look harder." That same week, she received a call from a student at Eastern State University, a young Hispanic woman named Sophia, who'd been expelled for missing exams while caring for her dying grandmother. Sophia had read about Nia's case and wanted to know if there was any way to fight back. Nia connected Sophia with Marcus, who agreed to take the case pro bono. The fight would be long and difficult, but this time the playbook existed. The evidence framework was established. Other students would come forward, and Sophia wouldn't have to fight alone. 2 years after that, Nia was invited back to Millbrook University to speak at a symposium on equity in higher education. She stood on the stage where President Westbrook had once promised change and looked out at an audience of students, faculty, administrators, and advocates from universities across the country. "My name is Nia Cross," she began, her voice steady and strong. "4 years ago, I was expelled from this university for saving a woman's life. I was called trash. I was threatened. I was told that I didn't belong. And for a while, I believed it." The room was silent, everyone listening. But then I learned something important. The system that told me I didn't belong was broken, not me. And broken systems can be fixed, but only if people refuse to accept brokenness as normal. She paused, letting her words sink in. Today, Millbrook University has policies in place to protect students who face emergencies. They have oversight to prevent discrimination. They have accountability mechanisms that didn't exist before. But that didn't happen because institutions suddenly decided to be fair. It happened because students, many students, refused to stay silent. She gestured to the audience, where several of the 128 reviewed students sat. If you're facing discrimination, if you're being punished for being human, if you're told your story doesn't matter, know this: you're not alone. There are people who will fight with you. There are lawyers who will take your case. There are advocates who will amplify your voice. And there are systems that can be changed if enough people demand change. Nia finished her speech to standing ovation, but what mattered more were the students who approached her afterward: the young woman who'd been dismissed for attending her brother's funeral, the transfer student who'd been penalized for reporting sexual assault, the first-generation student who'd been told he didn't have what it takes. Each one had a story. Each one needed to know they could fight back. Nia spent the rest of the symposium connecting students with resources, sharing contact information for civil rights attorneys, and building networks of support that would outlast any single case. She was exhausted by the end of it, but it was the good kind of exhaustion, the kind that came from doing work that mattered. That evening, she met Celeste for dinner at a restaurant downtown, not far from Market Street, where everything had started. They sat by the window, and Nia could see the spot where she'd knelt on blood-stained concrete and made the choice that had cost her everything and ultimately given her something worth keeping: the knowledge that she could fight systems designed to crush her and win. "I heard your speech today," Celeste said, raising her wine glass. "You've become quite the advocate." "I learned from the best," Nia replied, clinking her water glass against Celeste's wine. "Though I still prefer nursing to public speaking." "Good. The world needs nurses who see people, not cases, who stop when everyone else walks by." Celeste set down her glass. "I have something for you." She pulled out an envelope and slid it across the table. Inside was a check, not for Nia, but made out to the Nia Cross Student Defense Fund, a new nonprofit Celeste had established to provide legal support for students facing discriminatory treatment at educational institutions. "You're seeding it with $500,000, Celeste said. "That should be enough to take on at least 20 cases. Maybe more, depending on complexity. I thought you should be the one to decide which cases we take." Nia stared at the check, overwhelmed. "Celeste, this is too much." "It's not enough," Celeste interrupted. "You saved my life on Market Street. Then you saved my faith that institutions could be held accountable, that justice was possible, that one person's courage could matter. This fund is my way of making sure other students get the support you had to fight so hard to find." "Thank you," Nia whispered, "for everything. For believing me when the university called me a liar. For fighting when it would have been easier to just pay me off and move on. For treating this like it mattered." "It did matter. It does matter." Celeste reached across the table and took Nia's hand. "You matter, and every student who comes after you matters. Don't ever forget that." They finished dinner talking about the fund, about which cases to prioritize, about building systems of support that would outlast any individual victory. When they finally left the restaurant, Nia walked back toward the bus stop and found herself pausing at the corner of Market and 5th, the exact spot where Celeste had lain bleeding while 50 people walked past. Someone had painted a mural on the building wall, a portrait of a young black woman in scrubs, kneeling beside an outstretched hand with the words "Stop, Help, Fight" written in bold letters beneath. It had appeared mysteriously a few months ago, and the city had decided to preserve it as public art. Students took photos in front of it. Advocacy groups used it as a meeting place. And every day, people walked past and remembered that sometimes the right choice was the hardest one. Nia stood looking at that mural, at her own face rendered larger than life, at the story that had been hers alone and was now shared by everyone who'd ever been told their compassion was a weakness, their humanity was a liability, their voice didn't matter. Her phone buzzed, a text from Sophia, the student Marcus was representing. Hearing went well. University offered settlement. They're changing their policy. Thank you for showing me how to fight. Another text from a student in California. Read your story. Helped me find courage to report discrimination. Meeting with a lawyer tomorrow. Another from a high school student in Atlanta. My counselor said college isn't for people like me. Your story made me apply anyway. I got in. The messages kept coming, a steady stream of lives touched by one choice she'd made on a bloody sidewalk 4 years ago. The choice to stop when stopping cost everything, to fight when fighting seemed impossible, to believe that one person's courage could crack open systems designed to remain closed forever. Nia Cross, nurse, advocate, and the woman who'd refused to stay silent, looked up at that mural one more time and smiled. The artist had painted her looking forward, not back, toward a future where students like her didn't have to choose between compassion and survival, where institutions protected the vulnerable instead of crushing them, where grace was policy instead of exception. That future wasn't here yet, but it was closer than it had been. And every day, with every student who refused to stay silent, with every case the Defense Fund took on, with every policy changed and every oversight committee established, that future moved a little closer to reality. She walked to the bus stop, not because she couldn't afford a car now, the settlement money and her nursing salary had given her options, but because she liked the routine, liked staying connected to the version of herself who'd ridden these buses to 3 jobs and a basement apartment and never stopped believing she deserved better. The bus arrived. Nia climbed aboard, found a seat by the window, and pulled out her phone to respond to the flood of messages still coming in. Students needing help, advocates needing advice, reporters wanting follow-ups. A never-ending stream of need that she couldn't possibly meet alone, but refused to ignore. She typed responses until her stop, offering guidance and support and connection to resources that hadn't existed when she'd needed them. When she finally got home, to an apartment with no mold and functional plumbing and enough space to breathe, she found a package waiting at her door. Inside was a framed photo from graduation day, signed by everyone who'd fought alongside her. Marcus's precise signature, Celeste's bold scrawl, Linda's neat print, and dozens of students who'd added their names to the margins. In the center, someone had written, "To Nia Cross, who stopped when everyone else walked by. Your courage changed everything." She hung the photo on her wall next to her nursing license and the blood-stained scrub she still kept as a reminder. Then she sat at her desk and opened her laptop to begin drafting a response to the latest student who'd reached out, a young black woman at a prestigious university who'd been expelled for attending her father's funeral, who'd been told she should have prioritized her education, who needed to know that fighting back was possible. Nia began typing. "I understand what you're going through. I know how it feels to be punished for being human, but you're not alone and this fight is winnable. Here's what we're going to do." Outside her window, the city moved through its evening rhythms, buses and cars and people walking past each other without stopping, without seeing, without connecting. Most nights passed this way, everyone isolated in their own struggles, their own stories. But sometimes, rarely, someone stopped, someone saw, someone refused to keep walking. And when that happened, when one person's courage cracked open the possibility that things could be different, that systems could change, that institutions could be held accountable, that's when futures shifted. That's when invisible students became visible. That's when the next Nia Cross found the strength to fight back instead of accepting defeat. The story that had started on Market Street with blood on concrete and a choice that seemed simple at the time had become something larger than Nia had ever imagined. It had become a movement, a blueprint, a promise that students who came after would inherit a world slightly more just than the one she'd found. And as she typed her response to yet another student in crisis, Nia Cross, the woman who'd been called trash, who'd been expelled for compassion, who'd fought a university and won, smiled because she knew something that Dean Crow and President Westbrook and every institution that tried to silence vulnerable voices could never understand. You couldn't defeat someone who refused to believe they deserved to lose. You couldn't crush someone who knew their worth wasn't determined by the people trying to diminish them. And you couldn't silence someone who'd learned that the most powerful thing they possessed wasn't their credentials or their connections, but their willingness to stop when everyone else kept walking. That lesson, learned on a blood-stained sidewalk and proven in hearing rooms and conference rooms and everywhere else systems tried to maintain their power, was now being passed forward to every student who needed it. The fight wasn't over. It would probably never be completely over. But it was winnable. And that made all the difference.